This is Atomic Shinobi and today I am going to narrate what if Naruto was trained by Hiruzen and Jiraiya. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting our time, let's start the story.
The 10 figures materialized out of nowhere. Shades of different hues illuminated the cavern's shadowy interior. 3 kunyachi and 7 shinobi turned to face one another, each observing the other's appearances. The 2 newcomers to the underground group are paying close attention to their new teammates. One man stood at the head of the group, tall and lean, with a variety of piercings and bright orange hair that defies gravity. He had a lean, angular face with a determined, hard expression. His eyes, however, were the most remarkable feature of his appearance. There were 2 silver and purple pools with rows of circles that poured out one after the other like pond ripples. It was Pain, the leader of Akatsuki and the self-proclaimed god of aim. The little-known legend surveyed his gathered comrades, who were among the world's most formidable shinobi. Each is wanted for a variety of offenses in their home country. Up until now, the original 8 had proven their worth, and they were the best assets money could buy. He wondered if the last 2 would live up to his slack expectations as well. The man said in a deep, rough voice, "The meeting is beginning. I trust that you all have been well." The members made a variety of agreeing noises, but nobody spoke. Pain pointed to the far side of the cave with his left hand and said, "For those of you unaware, we have a new member in our midst. Please welcome Shikuden no Pikura to our organization." Less than 2 weeks after being formally inducted into the group, the woman bowed her head slightly in greeting. As he turned to face the woman, one of the older members, a squat and hulking figure, shifted. The man said in a rough, distorted voice, "Oh, another Suna product? It's rare that anyone with any real talent manages to crawl out of that hellhole." A thin man with a single visible eye and a long blonde ponytail laughed beside him. The man mockingly asked, "Is that honest surprise I hear, Sasori? Senpai, don't you have a part in scouting out the new blood?" The man looked over at his companion. "I don't get the final say on who joins our organization. You should know that by now, Didera." As she watched the 2 argue, the newest member cocked her head, paying attention to the first speaker's name. Calmly, "Sasori," she said. "Sasori of the Red Sands?" The man looked at the woman instead of his laughing companion. It seems someone has been paying attention to the history books in Suna. She shook her head, which surprised him. She went on to say, "Not at all. It's just that your grandmother would not stop talking about you." The man in the squat moved. "Oh, still being an old fool." Before the discussion could go further, Pain interrupted quietly, "Now that the newest introduction is made, I'd like to move on to the important business." Once again, the group turned their attention to the man. Before turning to face a figure to his right, the AIM leader said, "I'd like to begin with the matter of funding. How are things being handled in that regard?" The second tallest shinobi in the room gave Pain a quick look with his green eyes before focusing on the others. The man reported that it was troublesome to say the least. "We've lost a lot of funds within the past few months due to our ventures. The blockade of Naga Island and our dealings with that little runt Gadu set us back quite a bit. I've got someone looking into where the little bastard could have stashed his cash, but with his sudden death a power vacuum has opened up in the shipping industry. As it stands, Gatu's cooperation is failing apart without him to manage things. He never trusted anyone else to deal with his operations." The report caused Pain to frown. "How far off are we, Kakuzu?" The big man, Ataki missing nin, shrugged his shoulders lightly. "It depends on how we proceed. As things stand, we'll begin to have problems within in a few months' time. It may be time for us to cut off some of our unimportant operations." As they awaited their leader's answer, the group fell silent. After giving the man's words some thought, Pain reached a firm conclusion. "Very well, then we'll begin to downsize some of our projects. I've recently begun to organize the forces of AIM to better suit the change in leadership. Soon Hanzu's loyal subordinates will be wiped out and replaced with those under my command. As a result, we no longer need to focus so much on Kiri and Naga Island. We'll begin to withdraw our support from those 2 areas." Hoshigaki Kisami's massive form nodded. "That'd be smart. The resistance movement in Kiri has began to make ground. It would be in our best interest to cut our losses and let Yagura's regime be toppled. They'll remove the Biju, which should only make it easier for us to capture." Pain looked at the enormous man and said, "Agreed." He then returned his focus to Kazuku. "Make the necessary preparations. I'll leave it to you and Conan to decide who is worth retaining and who should be eliminated. Make sure to leave as little trace of our involvement as possible." The female AIM ninja, who was the second oldest member, looked at her longtime partner before giving a brief nod of comprehension. She was one of the original members and Pain's oldest friend, so she was well aware of what the man wanted done and would act accordingly. The Angel of the Hidden Rain was a fitting title for her. Sasori. Pain began once more. How goes the information regarding our primary objective? Before he could answer, the squat figure moved. My spy network has done a great deal of work. We've managed to find the identity of the Ichibi, Nanabi, and Yanbi Jinchuriki. I've relayed their names and basic information to Zetsu. He'll hunt them down one by one. From there we'll be able to study them further and decide on how we want to attack them. Pain complimented, good. Your work continues to be top-notch. He looked back at Kazuku's partner farther down the line. Speaking of excellent work, I'd like to commend Hidan and his temporary partner for their quick job in Rei, obtaining our property for Orochimaru's hands. The white-haired man snickered and said, or rather hand. Itachi sure did a number on that snake bastard. Taking the Sora ring back was easy when we finally knew where to find it. Of course I wish he'd been around when we went in. He would have been an excellent sacrifice for my ritual. From Pain's side, Conan's quiet voice murmured, Patience Hidan. The traitor will die in time. It is not your place to decide when that will be. The ex-resident of the now defunct Hot Springs village rolled his eyes at his superior's scathing tone. The leader now focused on the former Leaf Ninja, saying, speaking of Itachi, what has become of your mission to capture the Kyuubi? The Uchiha clan's dark-eyed murderer raised his head to meet the Akatsuki founder's eyes directly. The former Leaf Anbu told the collective group, it was enlightening and eventful to say the least. Pain and the others in the group scowled at the evasive response, saying, certainly not what we had been expecting. The man demanded, explain. Why were you unable to capture the 9 tails? Kisame interrupted from his position next to Itachi, saying, because shit got a little too interesting, although I had a bit of fun. A frown deepened on the AIM leader's face. Did something go amiss? At last, Itachi answered, Jiraiya of the Sannin was there. He prevented us from capturing the Jinchuriki. The announcement caused a moment of silence to descend upon the group. Pain and Conan exchanged glances as Itachi's words caused a silent dialogue to flow between them. The first to turn away was the woman, whose eyes narrowed as she considered the possibility that the Toad Sage was interfering. At last, Pain said, I see. He was prepared to face you with Konoha forces? In response, Itachi said, yes and no. While it was true that the Leaf Village was prepared for our arrival, we didn't encounter the Jinchuriki in the village. We were waylaid by several Leaf Junin including Hitaki Kakashi. But they were easily dispatched. Kisame interrupted again, saying, the 9 tails was traveling with the Sannin. They were out of the village when we first made contact. It was one of Itachi's old associates who told us that they had left several days prior. We spent most of the time tracking them down through Fire Country. Kakuzu pondered from his vantage point. So Jiraiya's spy network had the Leaf Village prepared? I've heard that man is a damn wizard in collecting information. Sasori chimed in, this could be troublesome. Konoha could inform the other villages of our desire for the Jinchuriki. Although their relations with Suna will be strained to say the very least. Pain shook his head and said, it doesn't matter. At this time the only nation with a Jinchuriki that the Leaf is on pleasant terms with Itaki. The Waterfall village doesn't have the skill to defend their host from us. Their only real advantage is their village's hidden entrance, and with Kakuzu that point is mute. Still, it would be wise for us to keep our ear to the ground for whispers. Sasori responded. Although we've been employed by Iwa several times, things could quickly change if they became known of our true intentions. The pleasant relations we've had with them could quickly turn sour. The thought caused Deidara to erupt in laughter. The former Iwa.nin interrupted, saying, don't worry about that Sasori my man. That old fart of a Tsuchikage is ruthless. Of all the villages Iwa is the most oppressive when it comes to the Jinchuriki. I can tell you right now for a fact that he won't lift a damn finger to help them at the cost of lives. Not that we know where the Yanbi container is anyway. That bastard has been gone for well over a decade, yeah. Pain interrupted, saying, we'll find him, and in the end we'll capture all of them, the Kyuubi included. Jiraiya of the Sannin will die like the rest of the Leaf Ninja if he stands before us. Kisame laughed. Still might not be that easy. The info relayed to us on the Kyuubi boy was dead wrong. He wasn't nearly as defenseless as we'd originally thought. The other 8 members took notice of the announcement. Conan interrupted, explain. Everything we've read said that the Kyuubi may very well be the easiest to capture. From her vantage point, the newest member asked, the easiest? Wouldn't it be the hardest? I figured the tales of its power alone would be cause for caution. Kakuzu interrupted, that may seem to be the case. But I know from my own experience of the years that Konoha has always been against using the demon's power. Never mind the fact that it was the Shodem Hokage who started the whole damn process of creating the tailed beast containers. As he cracked his neck to the left, Hidan added to his partner's remark, "It was the same during the last Great War. I was working as a mercenary. Heard something about everyone one of the Jinchuriki except for the Leafs." Sasori moved. "I fought against the Leafs' previous container." The puppeteer immediately caught everyone's attention. Pain growled, "Why did you not mention it before? Information like that would have been helpful." Sasori shook his head, surprising them. "No, it wouldn't have been. Because it was the same kind of deal. The woman was Leaf Junin, who boasted great skill. But she didn't use any of the demon's powers in the 2 encounters. We only knew she was the Jinchuriki because of our information network." He is correct. She was never one for using the 9 tails. The 9 figures turned to face the lone person in the group who had yet to speak. Finally contributing to the conversation was the infrequently chatty woman. Itachi looked at the young woman who was about his own age and muttered, "Yes. You would know the most about our target." Sincerely, she said, "Actually, I can't help you much. I remember meeting the previous container several times, but I've never actually seen her fight. I just knew of her position as Jinchuriki because of its importance to Fire Country." Conan eyed the young woman and asked, "And the current container? Do you have anything to report on him?" The Aim Kunyachi caught the sky-blue eyes. "Nothing that could help you. I've never even met him before. We lived in different worlds." Conan reiterated, "How curious. You've never met him before? Highly irregular when you consider your connection." With a shoulder shrug, the young lady fell silent once more. Conan scowled but remained silent. After a moment, Pain began again, "Please Itachi. Expand on why the Kyuubi container could suddenly become a problem." The group's youngest member turned his attention back to the leader. "He's far more skilled than our reports led us to believe. It also appears that he was made chunin from the last exam. And my source spoke of his actions during Orochimaru's attempted invasion where he was apparently spotted aiding in the village defense." Pain scowled once more. "So the reports on his lack of progress are lacking?" "Yes." Itachi nodded in conclusion, "although that isn't the most interesting thing." Kisame laughed. "Kid has got some really freaky power, pretty cool though." "What are the specifics?" As he considered the response, Itachi answered in part, "It is some kind of Earth-style release. He seems to have a unique Kekkei Genkai technique that allows him to create crystals of some sort." Pain's brows lifted. "Crystals?" Itachi went on, "Yes. He took us briefly off guard by using clones that were made of this element that later grew to encompass the entire hallway on both sides. I was forced to use a chakra-extensive technique in order to move around the attempted blockade. It gave the brat enough time for the Sannin to show up," said Kisame. "Took us totally by surprise. I've never seen anything like that before." Everyone scowled. Conan asked, "Have you any idea of its specifications?" Itachi shook his head and said, "None whatsoever. As I mentioned, I believed it to be an earth element technique because of the way it was formed. But beyond that I have no other idea of what he could use it for. It may be something unique only to him. I've never heard of any other Kyuubi Jinchuriki utilizing a unique elemental release." As the group's eldest member, Kazuku imparted, "It most likely is only him. The boy is an Uzumaki, correct? I remember they were noted for having special chakra types. Even the Senju clan marveled at their techniques from time to time." Deidara smiled mockingly and said, "So the 9 tails container has a little trick, yeah? It won't do the brat any kind of good." Kisame gave a snort. The big mist nin smiled, but it was difficult to see in the darkness. "It's not just that. It's how he used it and the look in his eyes. He knew why we were there and didn't show any real fear, and his technique was creative." "I agree with Kisame. If we continue to allow him to progress, the 9 tails container could prove to be a problem." Pain answered, "Then we will solve that problem. But for right now things in Fire Country could become problematic." Sasori interrupted from his position, saying, "Not if everything we've heard is true. It seems that Suna hasn't completely learned their lesson just yet. They may try again if Orochimaru is there to back them up." Pakura gave a headshake. "Foolish of them. They've already failed once before. Why drag the children of Suna into a prospective war?" Kakuzu answered, "Because they are desperate. Suna's on an even tighter budget than we are. The Leaf has been pilfering from them for years because of the daimyo. They have no choice but to fight if they want to continue on." Itachi scowled. "Such an attempt will be a serious folly, and it may lead to a major conflict." Normally irascible Hidan remarked softly, "It all depends on how Konoha acts. Those Leaf bastards are pretty damn tough. But if they show even the slightest hint of being weak." Pain concluded, "Then Suna could be joined by other nations. A worrying prospect indeed." Conan interrupted, "But it could also work to our advantage. If things did get out of hand, the other villages would be forced to marshal their shinobi, which would mean collecting their Jinchuriki. That would mean that most of the search work would be done for us. However, at the same time, it would also mean that the Jinchuriki would be used for war. They would have eyes on them at all times, making our movements all the more difficult to maintain in cover. Pain's gaze returned to the member who was the quietest. Fair enough points, but there is nothing we could do at the moment. Deidara interrupted, that's not true. We can kill Orochimaru, yeah. As tempting as that sounds, we still don't have any guarantee that it will stop Suna's ambition. Kakuzu replied dryly. If only all the problems in the world could be solved by killing someone. A headache started to develop, so Konan closed her eyes. As it stands, we can't do anything to change the outcome. For now we can only focus on what we can accomplish. Pain nodded and said, agreed. As it stands, I'll have Zetsu search harder for the information on the other Jinchuriki. We'll take as many as we can before the other villages realize what's going on. The Kyuubi would need to be sealed last anyway. Kisame whispered, that's right. And then looked to his left, looking down the line. How do you feel about that? The Kyuubi Jinchuriki's impending doom. The response was a delicate, lightly plucked eyebrow. The young woman said, I think I've already answered that question. Just because we share blood does not mean I care for his well-being. Kisame replied with a laugh. His face broke into a cheeky grin as he said, boy, you Fire Country products are rough. Especially to younger siblings. Itachi nearly tortured his into insanity, and you don't give a damn about your younger brother potentially dying. Just plain brutal. In response, the young woman shrugged her thin shoulders. If I didn't care enough about that fool of a grandfather of mine, why would I care about the life of a boy I've never met before? Pain interrupted, well said. There will be no more questions regarding her loyalties. Kisame gave a headshake. Wasn't about her loyalty. Just her morals. The man smiled once more. But I suppose you and Itachi don't have any. Silently, she retorted, morals are for the weak. Are you suggesting I'm weak? Nope. Just didn't understand how brutal you really were. Deidara laughed. You had to have known. She kills anyone without hesitation. I can tell from only speaking to her twice that it's her way. Pain closed his eyes and nodded. Indeed, it is clear you are the most ruthless of us all. Kisame grinned more broadly, as to be expected of the woman known by the epithet of the Demiyu killer. Itachi turned to look at the young lady. Truly you do your title well, Akira. Naruto turned to his right and extended a hand for his elder companion, muttering, that went well. With the right side of his jaw already starting to bruise a nasty looking purple, Jiraiya looked up at the little shinobi before he shook his head and stood up on his own. As he rubbed his cheek, the renowned shinobi coughed harshly. The woman could still knock him down with a single blow, even after all this time. Her eyes narrowed on the object of her wrath, and the kunoichi in question stepped out of the hole in the wall created by the Toad Sage's sudden departure from the establishment. As they fled to avoid the impending fight, people in Tanzuka Gai's streets screamed and ran away. Naruto frowned as he observed the woman's steady approach. Where was this city's police force stationed? Their whole motivation for going on this adventure, the Slug Princess, came very close to stopping the two. The smaller of the two leaf shinobi caught her attention with her honey brown eyes. Her fist clenched even more tightly at her side after something flickered in her eyes. Naruto took a step forward and stood between the woman and his Sannin trainer, observing the action with a nervous energy that he did not display on his face. She crossed her arms over her chest and snarly demanded, "Who the hell are you?" Before the boy could say anything more, Jiraiya interrupted, reaching out a meaty hand to clasp around the younger blonde's shoulder and saying, "This is Naruto." The Leaf Chunin glanced at the man out of the corner of his left eye as he slightly swiveled his head. The Sannin's unexpectedly solemn expression was a stark contrast to the man's typical attire. To be honest, it caught the blonde a little off guard. And you don't have to worry about him. The tall, curvaceous woman narrowed her eyes at the blonde, seemingly ignoring his words. Is this some kind of fucking joke, Jiraiya? She asked in a harsh voice that Naruto found annoying. Bringing him here? The face of the Toad Sage became stony. I told you not to worry about him. Why I've brought Naruto with me on this adventure is my own reason. Bullshit, was the woman's harsh reply. He looks Jew. The Sannin snapped, Naruto is nothing like your brother, and I know he doesn't appreciate being compared to him. The blonde Shunin remained silent, instead frowning as he attempted to follow the conversation. His azure eyes darted past the towering woman and toward the opening in the structure where another young woman was cautiously exiting, apologizing to the customers within. A tiny piglet with a ring of pink beads around its neck was in her hands, held close to her chest. What a fascinating pet choice. The Toad Sage went on, oblivious to his young proto-copyright ga copyright-s thoughts. I purposely had Naruto wait outside because I expected this kind of reaction. Leave him out of this. He's traveling with me for a reason. The woman didn't seem to believe him, I'm sure. And Tsunade. The man started, giving the woman a sharp look. That was beyond rude. I didn't even say anything past a greeting. You hit me like that again and we'll have a real problem. The woman seemed interested in that. She narrowed her eyes at the man, startled by the unexpected threat. Her fist then dropped to her sides, seemingly relieving the tension in her body. As her own young apprentice stood up beside her, she shook her head. Between you and Orochimaru. Her expression had softened considerably, but there was still a dangerous gleam in her eyes. I don't know which one of you fuckers causes me more grief. What part of leave me alone don't you two get? Jiraiya's eyes grew even more strained. As his grip tightened on the blonde's shoulder, he spoke firmly, Orochimaru, he was here? The woman's glare of response was sufficient. The Toad Sage's face tightened, then abruptly relaxed, revealing the normally sunny and bright face he usually wore. His smile brightened as he said, I think we need to try this conversation thing again. Too intelligent. What do you say we meet out of town? It was obvious to all that it was not a suggestion. The spontaneous group of four was spotted standing among the trees just outside the city less than 30 minutes later. The two Sannin gazed at each other, as did their respective apprentices. They were both unsure of how serious this conversation would become. Jiraiya began after a pause, so, Orochimaru? The curvaceous woman nodded but scowled. Less than a day ago. The Toad Sage pressed. Did he say what he wanted? Clearly, you want to learn more. Say where he was going. The woman answered, he wanted me to heal his arms, from whatever the hell Sensei did to them in his final stand. They were black and dead looking. He seemed to have trouble moving them, let alone using them. With pleasure, the Toad Sage nodded. Though he didn't display it from his stance against a nearby tree, Naruto was as well. He was thrilled to learn that the strangest of the Sannin were still being impacted by the Sandame's final technique. In just a few months, the pale-skinned bastard had caused him more grief than the entire city of Konoha had in a dozen years. It was good to hear about his suffering. The woman went on, he can't use ninjutsu, and I'm sure you know how he's been taking that. The smile that appeared on the boy's face was unavoidable. Now he was certain the old Hokage had been aiming for that. By that time, Orochimaru's ninjutsu obsession was well known. The notion that the man could no longer employ his renowned methods. Aside from killing the freak, it was the biggest reprimand the old Hokage could have given. The Sandame continued to visit his former pupil even after he passed away. With his arms folded, Jiraiya asked, did you do it? Heal him? The woman gave a headshake. No, at least not yet. An eyebrow had gone up on the left. You were planning on it? The woman shot back, I was planning on getting drunk and being left the hell alone. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed and he shook his head, saying, if healing his arms is what's needed to get rid of him, then that's what I'll do. The man asked bluntly, what was he offering you? You don't do things for charity, and if you really wanted him gone you would have just hit him in the face like you did me. The female snorted. She folded her own arms and said, it hasn't solved my problem with you, has it? And that's between me and him. Clearly, that was the incorrect response. When the discussion ended and there was only silence, Jiraiya's eyes went flat. The woman was looking resolutely back at her old teammate when Naruto passed her and turned to face her apprentice. The black-haired woman, clearly upset by the conversation, was staring at the ground close to her feet. The blonde realized that this story was not as simple as it seemed. And whatever had actually transpired had only made the younger woman uneasy. It's none of my business. As he raised his left hand and looked at his palm, concentrating his chakra on it, Naruto thought. I'll let Jiraiya take care of it. With an easy smile on his face, the Toad Sage finally started up again. You're right. It's none of my concern. And since it's clear you want to be left alone, I'll get right to the point. The tall woman, who wasn't used to the white-haired man giving up on things so easily, gave him a suspicious look. Jiraiya was behaving strangely today. Usually, if she showed him a little aggression, he didn't mind. Furthermore, she was surprised that he was so protective of the boy who followed him around. The young shinobi who had followed the man caught her attention. A bit too young, she pondered. Really, is this short brat a chunin? Unable to control her curiosity, she asked again, what's with the kid Jiraiya? Is this kid your new apprentice or something? After giving her back a quick glance, the man shrugged his shoulders. For the time being. In truth, he was Sensei's apprentice for the past few months. The woman started in surprise at this. She glanced back at the boy, who had started to look her in the eye, and blinked. He looked back at her with resolute blue eyes. A frown spread across her face. It wasn't her brother she was thinking about, but the boy had an oddly familiar appearance. What was it about the boy that made her memories tingle? She looked back at the other Sannin and said, I don't get it with you two. First Orochimaru and now you. New students after all this time. Both Leaf.Nin were interested in that. With a head tilt, Jiraiya asked, an apprentice? Orochimaru? Sure it wasn't just one of his little soldiers? The woman scowled more deeply. I don't know how he runs things now. I just know that only one kid came with him. Older teenager. He said something things out of turn and Orochimaru didn't seem to upset or behead him. The sage had lifted his right hand to stroke his chin and said, oh? Did you get a name? Clearly irritated by the questions, she shrugged. Kabuto or something like that. Like flesh on silk, the name slid into Naruto's ears. He practically demanded, what, as he got off the tree. His abrupt entry into the conversation startled the other tree ninja, who turned around. Disregarding that, Naruto approached the toad sage and stood beside him. Kabuto. Is that what you said? Asked the ninja with the blonde leaves. Are you sure that was the name? Anger flashed in the woman's eyes. I'm not deaf kid, that's what he said. Naruto's right hand clenched into a fist as he asked again, silver hair. Glasses? A real deliberate way of talking? Like he was condescending? The female gave a nod. That's the little bastard already, his tone irritated me. That last part was not heard by Naruto, only the affirmation. The blonde boy turned on one foot and snarled, son of a bitch, suddenly, how fucking stupid. With enough force to chip the bark, his right fist struck the trunk of the tree he had been leaning against. The youngest ninja in the group started using profanity that was way out of character for his age, and the other three ninjas watched. The two Sannin exchanged a quick look. With a harsh tone, Jiraiya questioned, you know this kid? Turning back to them, Naruto exclaimed, fucking hell I do. I knew there was something tickling at the back of my damn neck. The toad wisecracks demanded, details brat. You've met him? The blonde responded, balling both fists at his sides, yeah, during the damn exams. He came up to us, the rookies, just before the start. Said we were being too loud. Then he went on and on about being careful during the exam. The wise man scowled. And Otto Genin. They were shocked to see how strongly the boy shook his head. No. That's the thing. He was wearing a damn leaf headband. The toad sage looked at his old teammate once more, a spy then. The fucker went on and on about how he'd been in the exams 7 times before that, and he had information. What kind of information? Jiraiya sternly demanded, tell me everything you know. The blonde explained, making gestures with both hands, he had these cards. They needed his chakra to work. It told about all the stats and mission history of the people in the exam. I didn't really think about it at the time, but half of that stuff should have been classified for the Leaf, let alone every other country. Here he stopped, thinking of something else. His head started to shake from side to side, the frown on his face deepening. The hints were both very clear and deftly concealed. His mind would always be burdened by his incapacity to make the connections. He would undoubtedly grow from this error and never trust without question again. He sighed and slapped his right hand across his face, saying, Sasuke. He was speaking to Sasuke, not all of us. And after the sound team's attack on the exam, he helped us to get out of the forest but didn't even have his own team with him. As he considered the words, the sage's gaze became even more intense. He must be working directly with Orochimaru then. A plant of some kind, and from what you said, years in the making. After remaining silent throughout this introspection, Tsunade slowly nodded her head. A deep cover operative. And the old man didn't even recognize it because he was hidden as a genin, someone below the Hokage's radar. She sighed. I'm actually pretty impressed. Jiraiya turned back to her and said, Orochimaru was always a tricky son of a bitch. And you know how he is about young talent. Give the kid enough bribes and he would do anything the snake wanted. Naruto surprised him by shaking his head. The blonde gritted his teeth and lowered his hand, saying, no, not Kabuto. I can see it better now. He's a smart one. Not just some flunky. Tsunade reassessed the blonde and added, kid is right. His logic made sense. He might have been Chunin material. Orochimaru was really hurt. He wouldn't let some random soldier travel alone with him. I can tell that just traveling was taking a toll on him. He needed help to get this far. This kid had to be someone he trusted pretty well. Orochimaru and confidence. What an odd mix. Jiraiya flatly added, he's got to be pretty strong too. He didn't expect his former teammate to be totally helpless, but he said, if Orochimaru is in as bad a shape as you claim, then he can't defend himself as well as he normally can. In the first place, Snakes lacked arms. This kid is a fighter too. Slowly, the blonde boy nodded. He wasn't really hurt in the exam. A few cuts, but he'd probably plant them to make it look realistic. And I remember complaining to him about how he simply bailed out of the exam before the preliminaries, claimed he was injured, but how foolish could he really be? Jiraiya declared, "Don't feel bad, kid. This kid had to have fooled the old man and the various Junin for years." The blonde answered, "That's not an excuse." The big man looked at the smaller man with a satisfied expression and said, "No, it isn't. But it also isn't a reason to beat yourself up over it. The point is now we know. And you've also learned a lesson about paying closer attention to new shinobi, no matter what village they hail from." Leaning back on his spot on the tree, Naruto remained silent, preferring to ponder his thoughts. The sage accepted that and returned his focus to the current task. The man turned to face his old teammate. The Sannin gestured to the scowling blonde Shunin and said, "We're here on behalf of the Leaf Council Tsunade." The woman gave the man a suspicious look. "What do you want?" The man inhaled deeply. "I've been sent to ask, on their behalf, if you would take the position of Hokage." Both the woman and her apprentice returned the man's gaze. She clearly misheard the man, saying, "Excuse me, I thought you just offered me the position of Hokage." Jiraiya nodded after letting out a sigh. "I did. They'd like for you to become Hokage." The Toad Sage anticipated a wide range of responses from the one. An incredulous snort. An offer to assess his psychological well-being. Tsunade just turned around and left. In fact, he half expected her to strike him in the face for simply asking. Instead, she responded in one of the few unexpected ways he had anticipated. She chuckled. In an attempt to stay upright, she crossed her hands over his stomach and let out a high-pitched, genuine laugh. With a mix of surprise and annoyance, the sage observed as the woman knelt down and kept laughing aloud. Raising his eyebrows, Naruto observed from his perch against the tree. Through her laughter, she said, "You can't be serious. Me? Hokage?" The mere thought caused her to burst out laughing again. The black-haired woman who had been standing silently until now muttered, "Tsunade-sama," as she observed her mentor, "This is very rude." In an attempt to straighten herself, the woman staggered over to a tree and said, "And the offer is very stupid, Shizune. This has to be some kind of practical joke." Jiraiya started to lose patience. "I assure you, it isn't. It's been decided that you are the best candidate for Hokage. The first female Kage in history to be exact." The woman smiled and said, Why in the hell would I ever go back into that hellhole you call a village? Let alone to lead the damn place." Jiraiya scowled. "Because it's what sensei and your grandfather would have wanted." Her laughter faded slowly as she asked, "And I'm supposed to give a damn? Two fools who died in service of that god-forsaken place." The eyebrows on Naruto's face lifted even further. It was somewhat unexpected to hear the granddaughter of the village's founder, who was also a pupil of its longest-serving leader, discuss their passing and her animosity toward the village where she was raised. Naruto knew that he would have jumped to Konoha's defense right away months ago. If the woman had dared to disparage his house, he would have yelled back at her. The injustice of criticizing the former Hokage and the reasons she should be grateful for the opportunity to sacrifice her life for the village would have been discussed. He would declare his own intention to become Hokage after giving a flowery speech about the Leaf Village's beauty and all the good it did for the world. He completed all of this while making animated hand and foot gestures. Now, though, he no longer held such a limited perspective. He recognized that people's emotions varied depending on the topic. Even though he no longer worshipped the Hokage as he had in the past, he still found the woman's discussion of them to be somewhat offensive. However, he was also aware that she must have had some bad experiences in the past that shaped her current perspective. After all, nobody else in the Leaf Village was likely to share his personal dislike of the Yondaime. However, the man did not coerce those others into playing the part of Jinchuriki. "I don't care about it." With his right hand palm up, he reminded himself once more and started focusing on his chakra. "I'm going to leave it to the sage." And the man growled, "Tsunade. You don't need to laugh. It's a big honor to just be nominated." The woman turned around and rested her back against the tree, smiling. "Oh really?" she asked. "And why aren't you trying to take the position?" Refusing to elaborate on the agreement he had reached with the council, Jiraiya confirmed, "It was offered. But in the end it was decided that my role as lead intel gatherer would be put in jeopardy if I were to sit in the chair. And we need my spy network now more than ever." The woman laughed and said, "I'm sure. And I'm curious as to what would make you think I would be the least bit interesting in what happens to the village." Jiraiya tightened his jaw. He clenched his fist at his sides and said, "Save the bullshit about not caring for some other fool. I know you were doing work for Sensei over the years. It was in the notes he left behind in case he fell defending the village. The woman's laughter was cut short by this. Her smile vanished from her face in an instant. She straightened up and gave her old teammate a serious look. The man gave himself a stern look and said, "So you've been snooping around in the old man's things, That still doesn't mean a damn thing. Notice how I did everything in my power not to anywhere near the god-forsaken place. Why the hell do you think I would ever take the damn job?" To regain his composure, the Toad Sage inhaled deeply. "Look, Tsunade." She interrupted sharply, "No, Jiraiya." She trailed off as she looked at something else. "There isn't any way in hell that I'm ever going to show up in that damn village. And you can just forget trying to make," she said. After squinting at the man, her eyes widened abruptly. She growled, "What the hell, Jiraiya?" "What?" the man inquired, genuinely perplexed. "What's got you so upset?" His gaze shifted to the space behind him, over his shoulder. At that moment, he saw Naruto leaning against a tree and making every effort to shape a Rasengan in his hand. Halfway through, the jutsu spiraled into being before collapsing in his hand. With all his focus on his own task, the boy had started to perspire. "What the hell?" the woman exclaimed as she strode toward the blonde Shunin, passing the Toad Sage. "What are you doing, brat?" Her black-haired assistant called after her, bewildered, "Tsunade. Sama. What's wrong?" She grabbed the blonde boy's wrist firmly with her right hand and yelled, "What's wrong? I'll tell you what's wrong. Jiraiya's being an idiot again." A startled Naruto cried out, "What the hell?" as he was yanked violently away from the tree trunk he had been supporting. "Let go of me." Instead of paying attention to him, the woman pulled him over the Toad Sanin. "What are you doing, Jiraiya? Teaching a technique like this to him?" The Toad Sanin narrowed his eyes at the woman after blinking in surprise. "What's it matter to you?" he shot back, gesturing to the blonde leaf ninja who was having trouble. "What I teach to leaf ninja should be of little concern to you, seeing as you don't care what happens to that god-forsaken place." Naruto yelled, "Let go, damn it," as he attempted to free his arm from the older woman's strangely strong hold. "You shouldn't be trying to teach a kid something that powerful and you know it. This kid will end up killing himself," Tsunade said, squinting at the man. The wise man folded his arms across his chest and shot back, "That's not for you to decide. It isn't your place to touch him either. That's a Hokage's decision, and you're not Hokage." The woman gritted her teeth and squirmed, "Jiraiya." Naruto yelled, "I said let go," as he extended his left hand and released a kunai. Tsunade stiffened, then abruptly threw her hand aside, flinging the boy into the air and into a nearby tree. After thudding into the trunk, Naruto fell to the ground in a heap, struggling to get himself upright while his head rang. "Tsunade. Sama." Shizune cried in horror as she hurried past her instructor and into the direction of the young ninja. That was uncalled for. Instead of answering, the woman chose to look directly into her former teammate's eyes. Jiraiya's entire body tensed and his eyes were glaring as he fought the urge to strike the unyielding woman in the face. His entire being throbbed with annoyance as he said, "There was no reason to do that. You had no right to even touch him." Unfazed by the man's mounting anger, the woman returned his gaze. "It's safer than what would have happened if that jutsu had backfired. What are you thinking, just because he has blonde hair and blue eyes?" Jiraiya bit out, "I'm painfully aware that Naruto is not his father." She was enjoying the moment of recognition that flashed through her eyes. "And that has nothing to do with the fact that you've overstepped your bounds. Don't touch him again. I wouldn't have to do anything if you didn't insist on this stupidity." Tsunade snapped back, "Trying to get that kid killed. I didn't ask for your opinion." The woman slowly turned her head to face the Chunin, her jaw clenched. Anger radiated from Naruto as his blue eyes glinted back at her. Jiraiya grounded out, "Naruto. I've got this. Go clean yourself up, kid." Tsunade turned completely around to face the boy and said, "Nope, let's hear what he has to say." The sage glared at her back with his eyes. "Tsunade. What I have to say?" Naruto went on, reverting to his typical impatience. "I don't have anything to say to a coward like you." Tsunade's gaze flickered. "What did you call me, boy?" The woman with the black hair tugged at Naruto's shoulder, but he returned with an ugly expression. "A coward. Hag. Someone who's afraid." She said in a low voice, "Me. Afraid, and what is it you think I'm afraid of?" With a sneer, the boy answered, "Your past. You're so afraid of facing what you've lost that you won't look to the future. You're just stuck running in place, making excuses for your own actions." The woman narrowed her eyes. "And what would a stupid brat like you know about loss? About pain?" She was shocked to hear the boy's harsh laugh, which annoyed the other three ninja. Asking a Jinchuriki what he knows about loss, Naruto smiled cruelly in response. You're not only a coward, you're a fool as well. Naruto. Jiraiya interrupted before anything more could be said. That's enough. With his sneer still intact, the blonde glanced at the man before passing the woman. With her thoughts focused on what the boy had said to her, Tsunade let him go without saying anything more. The ship of Kyuubi. She clenched her hands at her sides. Consequently, he would need to be an Uzumaki. However, then. Without looking back, the woman said, You're Kushina's kid. That's the only thing that makes sense. Before continuing, Naruto went rigid in shock. Jiraiya responded on behalf of the boy, Naruto isn't his mother either. And you don't have to concern yourself with him any longer. Tsunade spun around her left heel and abruptly said, Kushina died for the village. And Namikaze did too. You aren't half the talents they were. Why waste their sacrifices by risking your life as a shinobi? In the end all you'll do is die. Naruto came to a complete halt. Over his shoulder, the blonde answered, You remind me of a little kid I knew. Crying about everything but not doing a thing to solve any problems. Do me a favor and don't worry about what choices I'm making. Ignoring the boy's response and Jiraiya's growing ire, the woman went on, You're doing the memory of your parents a disservice. Don't you owe it to them to live a full life instead of dying young in the service of the law? Snarling, Naruto turned to face the woman, his eyes icy with rage. I don't owe them a damn thing, he said. I've paid them back in full long ago, so don't go spouting your bullshit to me. Jiraiya snarled, Enough Naruto. Stop letting her bait you. Tsunade turned to face the man and demanded, Why are you encouraging this boy Jiraiya? Letting him live as a shinobi? He'll die like all the rest. The man growled, You have a lot of nerve, Tsunade. I like how you're suddenly concerned with Naruto's well-being despite the fact you didn't even bother to check on him for years. And don't give me bullshit about not knowing he survived. I know Sensei would have at least mentioned that her son still lived. Even if that meant not telling you he was the Jinchuriki. She responded with a grunt, I had my reasons. In response, the man snorted. Jiraiya retorted, Yeah, it's called being a coward. Just like, he said. That was not answered by Tsunade. Rather, they decided to glower at the man. Funny how you claimed to care for Kushina's well-being but didn't even bother to show up for the birth of her son or her wedding day. Did you know the old man's wife died on his birthday? She was at ground zero for the Kyuubi's escape, helping the girl to give birth to her son. Maybe if you had been there instead it would have made a difference. But because you were bitter about Dan and Nawaki we'll never know. Tsunade growled, Don't talk about those two Jiraiya. I'm only going to warn you once. Before something occurred to him, the man stared down at the woman and became silent. A means of using one of Tsunade's vices to obtain what he desired. I'll make a deal with you. You like to gamble, don't you Tsunade? The woman gave him a wary look. Here are the terms. Naruto here has till the end of this week to finish learning the Rasengan, on his own. The man appeared to have grown a second head as the other two ninja turned to gaze at him. What the devil is he doing to me now? Tsunade growled and told the man, That's 4 days. Not much of a challenge. Once more, the man folded his arms. Humor me. And what do you get? Asked Tsunade. Me as Hokage. Jiraiya answered, That's right. You'll take the position of Hokage. The female snorted. Hardly fair. The man replied, You haven't heard about what you'll be getting in return. Don't you at least want to hear? She retorted sharply, Is it you leaving me the hell alone? Because that's what I want the most. He nodded, which surprised her. That's it exactly. I won't ever bother you again, and I mean it. In search of any hint of a ruse, the woman squinted at the man. The toad sage, however, merely looked her in the eyes and took his statement very seriously. He wasn't a liar, but he was many other things. In her heart, she knew he would keep his promise. The offer was nearly too good to refuse. I'll pass, I said. That isn't weighted enough in my favor. The man's eyes narrowed. I didn't finish with the terms. She arched her left eyebrow before crossing her arms to adopt his position. And the sage went on, Not only that, but as a second condition you'll have to give up the Shodem's necklace if you lose. Her apprentice gasped behind her, and the renowned medic blinked in surprise. The tiny green crystal dangling from a thin black string had been gradually followed up her bust line by her left. The renowned god of shinobi gave a crystallized piece of chakra. It was one of the few remaining items that connected her to her Senju forebears, and said to have 3 gold mines worth of value. Why would I bet this? She shot back, her hand gripping it protectively. She was surprised when Jiraiya grinned, because as a second condition on my side, if Naruto can't do it he'll immediately quit as a shinobi. The blonde Shunin became furious and exclaimed, "What the hell, Jiraiya? Why in the fuck would you make that damn bet?" Calmly, the Toad Sage looked over his furious friend. "Calm down, Naruto." The blonde responded, "Calm down," as he stomped his right foot. "Calm down. What the hell do I have to be calm about?" With no emotion, Jiraiya returned, "Because you'll win. And you know it. It's what you do, win bets." "The hell it is," retorted Naruto again. "I especially don't like to tempt fate. Remember that from just last week, damn it?" His arms were folded. A completely different situation. "How?" "Because it is," was the firm response, "and you'll win for sure." In frustration, Naruto forced his mouth shut after opening it to reply once more. This was not progressing quickly. He lifted a hand to run it through his perspiring hair. He closed his eyes and tried to restore the composure that the female Sannin had deprived him of. So far, this trip had been nothing but hell. Jiraiya was pleased to see his young proto-copyright got copyright. At last, Naruto had become sufficiently composed to assess the situation. He felt somewhat relieved by the boy's outburst. It demonstrated that not all of the blonde he had encountered over the course of those months had vanished entirely. Holding his hands out in front of himself as though to hold something off, Naruto started again, saying, "All right. Let's start this again. And go back over how you've screwed me by dragging me into this mess." Jiraiya said, "You dragged yourself in. Next time just ignore the woman." Naruto denied, "She wouldn't let me go, and you pretty much just stood there while she threw me around." The man gave a shrug. "You were fine. Shizune is a medic, and it's not like she was the first high-ranking ninja to toss you like a rug." Ignoring the final portion of the Sannin's explanation, Naruto went on, "And now you've made me take a deal I want no part of. You've put me in one hell of a tough position." Jiraiya suggested, "Use your clones. You've been begging about it for a while now." The blonde's rage started to grow once more when she said, "That isn't the point and you know it. You know what will happen to me if I can't finish this." The man nodded slowly, "Yes. Your pride will demand you follow through with the terms of the bet, which will also mean you'll be useless to the Leaf Village." Something flashed in the boy's eyes, and the Toad Sage watched. Naruto said with a broken voice, "A Jinchuriki who can't be a ninja, if that's the case." As Jiraiya concluded for him, "They'll advocate for your Biju's removal, which means you die." It was there. Naruto came back and said, "And you've done this to me. Put me in another life or death situation. You should be used to them by now. It's what life as a shinobi is all about." Naruto sighed and said, "That doesn't mean I should go looking for them." Jiraiya scowled. "Look at it this way, you already had the problem to begin with." Naruto frowned as he looked up at the man. The sage went on, "If the village Junin decided that I couldn't do it because of the spy network, then the next logical candidate would be Shimura Danzo." Naruto scowled even more. "Who?" The sage responded to the silent query, "He's a tyrant. The Sandame's rival from the younger years. A man who will stop at nothing to get what he wants." The Toad Sannin exhaled. The old man messed up big time by being too kind. Danzo is one of his biggest mistakes. Instead of nipping the problem in the bud right away, he sought to take the easy way out and let the man have his way. And now it's coming back to bite us in the ass. Sincerely, Naruto remarked, "I'm not sure I understand. What's the problem?" The response from Jiraiya was, "Danzo like war. A lot. He thinks the Leaf Village has gotten too weak and should be making aggressive moves to rid the world of all obstacles. Starting with the small villages before moving on to the other major powers. He also believes a shinobi should be a mindless tool who only follows orders and ignores all emotions. A philosophy he had extended to Root." "What the hell is that?" the blonde asked, bewildered. To the boy's surprise, the Sannin responded, "His own personal Anbu force. The Sandame let him run it for years as a sort of black ops, and a way to appease Danzu's more violent tendencies. But before the old man knew it, Root had become too powerful. He ordered it to be shut down, but it's an open secret amongst the Junin-level shinobi the Root is still fully operational. Danzo has used it for years to undermine the Sandame. And many horrible acts around the world can be traced back to the organization if people knew where to look." Frowning, Naruto asked, "And I can take it he doesn't like me?" Jiraiya gave a snort. "Danzo doesn't like anyone. But he probably also doesn't hate you. Just thinks that a Jinchuriki is a weapon first and foremost. Used to get into with Minato over how your mother should be used. The old man once told me that Orochimaru was actually a product of Root. Said that things really took a turn for the worst when Orochimaru was put into Danzu's control. And he isn't the only one who's seemingly gone rough from the experiences." The blonde's scowl deepened. The direction of this did not appeal to him. "Let me guess. He thinks I don't do the job of demon container well enough? Slowly, the sage nodded. Right in one. According to the other old fossils on the council, he used to demand the Sandame turn you over into his custody so that he could make you into another one of his puppets. That peace-loving view of the third grated his nerves. He's all about using force to get what he wants. Naruto concluded, and he wants the Kyuubi, which means I was in risk of losing my life anyway. Got it. The blonde let out a sigh as he found it difficult to keep the information straight. This was awful. Like, really, really awful. Why was he unable to simply be left alone? After a moment, the sage began again, saying, so basically kid. You've got the fate of the village in your hands. Either you finish the technique and get Tsunade to become Hokage, or you gamble on me and hope Danzo doesn't try to have you killed. Naruto shook his head and said, you son of a bitch, this is really fucked up. Life is fucked up. Are these reports accurate? The black man in his late 20s, known as the Chunin, bowed his head to the Leaf Village elder. He had a shred of stubble on the end of his chin. He looked back up and fixed his brown eyes on Homura, saying, we've double and even triple checked it, sir. It appears that the information is correct. The retired shinobi glanced at his longtime teammate as he turned his head to the left. Kaharu scowled back at him, expressing exactly how he had been feeling. The paper in the man's left hand was tightly gripped by his fingers. Even Kami appeared to be opposed to the Leaf Village these days. From an outpost in River Country, a messenger bird brought the news. Years ago, during the Second Great Shinobi War, the small nation had permitted the Leaf Village to construct the waypoint in their country. It served as a resting place and guard post for different Leaf Shinobi during times of peace. Despite lacking their own shinobi, River Country was able to regularly rely on the Konoha shinobi forces to police their territory because of their positive relationships with Leaf Village and Fire Country. In exchange, the Leaf was permitted to use the nation as a small base of operations, primarily to monitor their Wind Country competitors. He was grateful for that in moments like these. In addition to being a military installation, the Juhi outpost was also a tiny village. The Leaf Village's first line of defense against Wind Country intrusion was the small town, which was manned year-round by a group of shinobi and kunyachi. Additionally, the advantage of surprise had long since passed, even though the Sand had managed to totally elude the patrols as they entered the Fire Country. As temporary Hokage, one of Homura's first actions was to ensure that additional forces were stationed at the 5 outposts that were used to keep watch over hostile villages. The Leaf Village would make sure to be informed in advance of any impending attacks. The report that ended up in his possession had been quickly flown in. A patrol had discovered a small group of Sand shinobi who had been scouring River Country's boundaries. They were accompanied by a group of Auto ninja. Thus, Orochimaru and Suna's alliance is far from over. To think otherwise would be foolish, he would concede. Iwa's hatred of the Leaf Village was the only one that could match Orochimaru's, and Suna had already gone too far to just give up. There were both positive and negative aspects to the Leaf Village attack. On the one hand, it demonstrated that the Leaf's reputation as the strongest wasn't just a myth and that Fire Country and Konoha were far from helpless in spite of the Yondaime Hokage and the Uchiha clan's defeat. However, it also revealed significant security flaws and potential weaknesses. In the past, Suna would never have even considered attacking their neighbors directly. The ease with which they were able to organize the invasion, however, was a testament to how far the Leaf Village had descended from its heyday. Very quickly, things were going to get hairy. As the Chunin left the office, Kaharu muttered, "This could get a lot worse before it gets any better. Nothing seems to be going right these days." With a hum of agreement, Homura remained silent. Unfazed by his silence, the elderly woman went on, "We have to start thinking about the worst-case scenarios." She was certain that they could repel the 2 villages if necessary. If Suna and Otto come at us head-on. Well, that is worrying but not too much trouble. Homura nodded in agreement and said, "No, not too much to worry about. But it could indeed open up a can of worms that we aren't ready for. Indeed, if things kept going this way, the future would be bleak. Orochimaru would undoubtedly seek assistance if Suna and Otto's combined strength wasn't sufficient. Iwa, specifically. The Leaf Village would then face severe difficulties. Only Kusa and Taki could currently be relied upon as allies, and neither village would be very helpful in fending off the renegade Snake Sanin and 2 of the Great Five. Then there were the unidentified elements, such as Kiri and Kumo. It was not impossible that a 4th Great Shinobi War would break out. Homura's stomach turned at the thought. The destruction caused by the Kyuubi's attack on the village had not yet fully healed Konoha. Furthermore, Suna and Otto's attack had only served to further undermine their attempts to recover. In addition, elite shinobi were lacking in genuine quality. Top-tier talent was lacking, as the hunt for a Hokage candidate had shown. Numbers by themselves cannot replace skill, even though Konoha could claim the greatest number of active shinobi due to their lowest number of losses during the most recent Great War. In the world of ninja, a single highly skilled person could wipe out entire regiments. The Leaf Village was all too familiar with this. It was, after all, how Namikaze had prevailed for them in the previous major battle. Kaharu shook her head and muttered, "We can't afford this, not now, not ever." Homura retorted, "And yet it appears more and more like we'll have no choice. As it stands, things are looking rather grim. But at the very least we have time on our sides." "But do we really? Can we honestly give a time frame? Who's to say Orochimaru isn't already plotting another attack?" Homura shrugged and said, "Perhaps he is. But as it is, we can only go on what we know. And we know that Sarutobi's final attack dealt him great injuries. It stands reason to believe that he could be taking this time to recover before he makes any more moves." The idea of the Leaf Village falling after all this time made Kaharu frown and look down, feeling sick to her stomach. That still doesn't give us much of a plan. Even in the unlikely event that it takes years as opposed to the probable months. This village may not survive another war. With a concerned frown, Homura concurred, "No, not as things are right now. We'd need a miracle. Or maybe." Slowly, he started again, "Or at the very least, we'd need better allies." With a look of bewilderment on her face, Kaharu looked up at him. "What are you thinking?" Homura steeped his hands in front of his face and placed the paper on the desk. "I'm thinking that perhaps we can use Danzu's root, that we all pretend doesn't exist, to actually do what it was made for. Defend Konoha." The woman's scowl deepened. "We still haven't determined that we can trust him." The man said, "True, but we can trust one thing about the man." "And what is that?" "Simply put," Homura said, "he's greedy, and ambitious, but at the same time he loves this village. And he'll do anything in his power to see it succeed, including sacrifice all of the men under his command." Even more focused was the confusion. "What are you playing at?" He leaned back in the Hokage's chair and said, "We already know the 3 things we need to accomplish before things get too hectic. The first one is time. We don't have enough of it, but I'm sure that with Root making precise moves in the shadows we can extend what little we have." Seeing his point, she slowly nodded. "Would Danzo agree to that?" Homura retorted, "I think that he'll do anything necessary to make Konoha strong. And right now what we need is more time. More time to train, to organize, to recover. Even if he did plan Sarutobi's death with Orochimaru, I have a hard time believing he didn't have some plan in place to save the day. In fact, I'll go as far as to say he had something ready for the Shukaku. I can see him letting half of the village falling under the beast's might before his men swooped in to save the day. He could then use that as a power base for propelling himself into this office." She gave another nod. "Yes. That would be like Danzo. He would definitely sacrifice the lives of villagers and shinobi if it meant getting him what he wanted." Homura noted, "But he didn't plan on Uzumaki. No one did. And the fact that his summon is now unique to him both gives the boy an air of mystery and safety. As he grows he'll be able to use the technique to a greater effect. And if what Sarutobi and Jiraiya think about the boy is true, then by the time anyone can link the summon to him he'll have built enough skill and made a name for himself. The boy could have very well cut Danzu's rise to power short and not even known it." The woman thought about it. If Danzo found out about that, the boy would be in even more danger than he already is. "But I don't think that he will. Or at the very least not until it's too late. By that time the boy will have learned enough to defend himself from most threats. The progress he's made already is astounding to say the least." According to Kaharu, "I can see that, but what does that have to do with Danzu's route? I'd like to think that if Danzo realizes how far Suna and Otto plan to take this, he'll be forced to intervene. I can see, in his arrogance, that he might not have foreseen a situation that involved Orochimaru simply trying again. And even though he loves to make trouble and constantly talks about war, not even he can ignore how much trouble we'll be in if things continue at this rate. If we lay out a plan for him that involves him using Root to buy us some time, I can see him doing it." "Fair enough. But what good will a few months or years do us?" "A lot," was Homura's direct response. "Although we don't have the talent, we do have the potential. As it stands, one of the main reasons we lack the prime skill that we once held is due to arrogance. The last generation simply didn't have the fire in them to train because they grew up with the idea that Konoha was so superior that no one would ever even attempt to try us again. In some ways, Namikaze's decimation of Iwa's forces created as much of a problem as it did bring us a victory. The younger shinobi simply believe that someone will once again save them. That shinobi like the Yondaime grow on trees here in the Leaf Village." Kaharu let out a sigh. "I can see that as well. They don't truly understand the man's brilliance. Shinobi like him come along once every century, not every decade. Indeed. But at the same time, while the bulk of our forces may be lacking, it isn't as if we don't have any potential on hand. Homura made the point. Although Uzumaki was the only one to make Chunin, and rightfully so, the exams still said quite a bit about the skill of our young genin, especially the rookie squads. On that point, too, she could agree. It was almost unheard of for a group of inexperienced shinobi who had only been out of the academy for 6 months to advance to the finals of a Chunin exam, even if it was held in their hometown. But 3 groups. Furthermore, Meida's squad was just a year older. It did reveal a great deal about the new generation of ninjas' talent. It is to be expected. Many of them are clan heirs or at the very least related to them. Of course they would have an advantage over normal rookies. Homura gave a headshake. It's not just them. Even those who were shunted over into the remedial forces are surprisingly talented. And simply because they belong to clans doesn't make them necessarily the cream of the crop. This current group may be the strongest graduating class we've had yet. Before realizing that she couldn't refute what her former teammate was saying, she opened her mouth to argue that it was all real. The younger troops did have a lot more talent than most years did, even though they lacked the older shinobi's skill. She could tell where he intended to take this. You're looking to fast-track them along? Was not so much a question as a statement. Force their instructors to push them even further? Homura answered, it would be the best course of action, and those in the reserves could be forcefully paired with Junin. Have all of our genin put into an accelerated learning program. And send them on more C-ranked missions than usual. Shuffling the teams couldn't hurt either. Present them with the challenge of adjusting to new teammates while giving them a different look on what the village has to offer. She, too, saw the positive side of that. No matter how the Suna-Otto situation played out, it could only help at this point to give their exceptionally talented group of genin more training and experience in the field. Training with the Sandaime and Jiraiya was already advantageous to Uzumaki. Given top-notch training, it was theoretically possible that another member of his graduating class could develop at a startling rate. Kaharu went on, I can see the merits in that, but how far do you think we'll manage to push them? Homura replied, that depends on how much time we have left, but even still you know as well as I do that attempting to gauge the growth of young ninja at this point is a hard thing to do. At least this way we can ensure that the village would be left in good hands for the next generation. Fair enough. And the part about allies? I'd like to think that desperate times call for desperate measures. Homura began. As it stands, we have to assume that if things continue to go on this way and another great war does erupt, that he will not hesitate to jump at the chance to take us down. And although we've avoided outright aggression, things between Konoha and Kumo have been strained as well. That would leave us with 3 of the great 5 villages to contend with. And that doesn't count Orochimaru and Otto. The idea made her frown grimly, a fair assumption. As a result, the only option we have is to procure more allies, namely the last of the great 5. Kaharu's eyebrows went up on both sides. Kiri? You want to alliance with the Mist? Why not? Asked Homura. Of the other grade 5 we've had the least amount of contact with them. In fact, if not for the situation regarding Uzu, you could very well argue that interactions with them have been minimal at best. They are likely to be the least hostile of the other villages. Kaharu acknowledged, true. But even still you're asking for quite a bit, not to mention the toll the civil war has taken on the village. You are correct on both fronts, but I also see the 2 problems coming with the same solution. How so? Homura replied, the end of their civil war. As it stands, all villages have made it a point to ignore any and all actions in Kiri, simply choosing to monitor the situation. The previous Mizukage was a tyrant, as we all know, and had no interest in making allies with anyone. But what about helping to out the new regime? Not only would we be able to set ourselves up with good standing, it would also allow us to make the village inroads by way of debt. The rebel faction is of course the faction that is supported by what is left by their bloodline talents. In addition to helping them to take complete control of the village with haste, we can attempt to warn them about the impending war and the threat Akatsuki poses to the 2 Biju that call their country home. Kaharu noted, a fair plan, but still quite a bit optimistic. Who's to say someone else hasn't already thought of the same thing and we just don't know it? Or that this so-called new regime would be any better than the previous one in terms of a possible ally? As Homura acknowledged, we don't know. In recent years, there had been tension between the leaf and grass villages. But at least it's something. As it stands, with just Kusa and Taki on our sides, we'll be crushed. And I don't like to just assume we can just trust Kusa as things are. In addition, they had consistently come across as arrogant and jealous of the leaf. If it meant eradicating the leaf, he could easily envision a scenario in which the grass country sided with their other border neighbors. Kaharu reminded him that all of this hypothetical talk is worthless as things currently stand. We don't know if we can really convince Danzo. And those decisions needed to be made by the full-time Hokage. We don't have the power to make such decisions. I know. Which is why Jiraiya needs to return with Tsunade as soon as possible. Once more, the woman scowled. You honestly think that he'll manage to pull it off? In addition to the necessity for her medical ninja skills, we have no choice but to hope for that at this point. Having her back in the village will be a major boon and do a great job in increasing the village profile. That may help factor into how things progress from here on out. As far as he was concerned, Hitaki Kakashi was still one of the most formidable Junin in the village and would be required in the years to come. Still, even with the knowledge that she had been working for Hiruzen for some time now, I can't see any scenario that ends with her willingly walking back through the village gates, let alone taking up the position as Hokage. The woman had always been criticized by Kaharu. Sarutobi had made the same mistake over the years when she left the village. Rather than asserting his authority as Hokage, he had let his emotions override what was essential for the village's survival. Homura noted, and yet Jiraiya was sure that he could convince her, and regardless there isn't anything we can do or say about it now. As it stands we'll have to rely on Jiraiya and wait for his return. The wait was killing them. But when will that be? Instead of waiting for the Sannin to return, the village needed it now. The only thing he could reply was, hopefully soon, I'm sure of it. Long before the woman had even broken into the little clearing he had been using as a makeshift training area, Naruto was alert and vigilant. The blonde-haired Chunin had squatted on his right knee and was holding a kunai firmly in his other hand. His blue eyes squinted as he saw the slug Sannin's apprentice stop just in front of him, her own eyes darting around. As her attention finally settled on the young leaf ninja, she asked, You're Naruto-kun, right? Naruto eyed her and nodded slowly. He chose to ignore the familiar way she called his name and gave a cautious response, That's right. Can I help you? Quickly. Where is Jiraiya? Sama? She asked, her gaze returning to the man in question as though he would suddenly materialize. The blonde honestly shrugged and said, No clue. I haven't seen or heard from the old pervert since yesterday. It was the reality. Since late afternoon, the young Chunin had not communicated with the man. Prior to the boy announcing his plan to go out drinking with his former teammate, Jiraiya had praised him for his commitment to training. He claimed that catching up with his old friend would be a good way to obtain information. Naruto had objected to the notion of his trainer, Guardian, abandoning him. He had gone unnoticed by Jiraiya. I can't help you. The woman's distress appeared to worsen, if that's even possible. As he observed the indications of concern, Naruto stiffened. He would have just ignored her and gone about his business months ago. Or, if he had noticed, he would have hurried to her aid without knowing what was wrong. He now just decides to wait and observe. She persisted in her question, You have no idea, whatsoever? It was all he could do to support her. Last I heard he was thinking about a night out with your teacher. Said he wanted to catch up on old times. The woman's face appeared to lose all color, and a feeling of concern seemed to rise in the blonde. This was not going to work out well. I advised that bastard against leaving. As calmly as he could, Naruto asked, Why'd I get the feeling that my answer only served to make you more nervous? Before responding, the woman appeared to pause. Tsunade. Sama. She said softly at first. I think she may be in trouble. Naruto's eyes narrowed even more. What kind of trouble? His eyes locked with the woman's dark ones. Orochimaru. Amazing. Tsunade, you stupid bitch. While struggling to stay upright, Jiraiya used his left hand to support himself against a nearby wall and silently growled the insult. His disappointment in himself was equal to his annoyance at his former teammate. He ought to have anticipated this kind of thing. Whenever he wasn't ready to handle it, Tsunade always decided to pull some shit out of her ass. He was to blame for assuming she would keep her end of the bargain. He knew in his heart that if Tsunade had been given the opportunity, she would have backed out of their agreement without hesitation. It was the rationale behind his extreme caution in preventing her from seeing Naruto in recent days. She would never have stayed until the end of the week if she had known about his prowess with the shadow clones and his quick development as a ninja. He did not, however, factor in her student. Tsunade's proto-copyright ga copyright would follow her instructions without question, even spying on the young Chunin to obtain an update on his progress. It was his own fault for assuming that Tsunade's haughtiness would solve the issue. He ought to have been aware that she would figure out his scheme and realize he wasn't telling her the whole truth. By now, she's most likely halfway abroad. The wise man grinned solemnly. To make it impossible for me to follow, they drugged me up and threw me into an alley. It's just my bad luck. Officially, it was. This trip didn't work out. Jiraiya, Sama. Or perhaps it wasn't. The sound of his name being called caused the Sannin to turn as best he could. He could still see Shizun's form running down the hallway towards him, desperation radiating from her form, despite his blurred vision and unsteady balance. He did the best he could with his free hand, waving to the woman. Shizun. He began to mumble. Fancy meeting you here. Jiraiya. Sama. Where is Tsunade? Sama? She asked, disregarding his salutation. I'm worried about her. Confusion seeped into frustration. As he absorbed the woman's words, the Toad Sage scowled. Concerned for Tsunade? He held up his hand as though to fend her off, saying, wait a minute. The girl didn't need to know that he had woken up in a filthy alleyway. Start from the beginning. I lost track of Tsunade yesterday night after she drugged me. Nobody did. The woman's face appeared to turn even paler, if that's possible. Oh no. Her terrified eyes had widened. She must have gone ahead to meet Orochimaru. The name of his former teammate caused Jiraiya's attention to narrow as much as possible. What? Was a sharp word. What do you mean? Before responding, Shizun paused, her face tinged with fear. She rushed to clarify, she was set to meet with him today. Orochimaru gave her until the end of the week to decide. Something about being able to bring back Uncle Dan and Nawaki-kun. A look of horror spread across the sage's face. The Edo Tensei had been offered by Orochimaru? That was awful, awful. Did she poison him for that reason? To include him as a sacrifice? How does Naruto fare? Even though he had a strong desire to think she hadn't fallen that far, his paranoia wouldn't rule out the possibility. In Fire Country, Tsunade's sorrow over the deaths of her brother and lover was all but legendary. To get them back, would she go to such lengths? Except, I don't think she planned to take his deal. All right. What? With his mind racing, Jiraiya managed to ask, what do you mean? What gave you that idea? The woman went on to say, she seemed angry to me. Like the offer insulted her. I think that's why she punched you when you first arrived. Someone to take her aggression out on. She shifted her position. I'm worried that she may try to take Orochimaru on by herself. The wise man scowled. The woman couldn't have been that conceited. It had been years since she had been in a real battle. And it seems that this Kabuto child was Orochimaru's backup while he was hurt. Tsunade was not going to attempt to fight them both off by herself. The man tried to persuade her, saying, I think you're overreacting, Shizun. As well as himself. I don't think Tsunade will. His response was interrupted by a massive boom in the distance. After taking a moment to gather his thoughts, Jiraiya sighed and rested his head against the wall. Well, perhaps Tsunade was that stupid. It would also clarify why she actually gave him a drug. She wished for him to stay out of the altercation. This trip was a complete bust. The man told Shizun, who was now on the verge of hyperventilation, okay. I was wrong. Wasn't she also a damn kunyachi? A frown split his face. Hey, stay calm. Taking a deep breath to try to calm her racing heart, the woman appeared to instantly regain consciousness. Jiraiya turned to lean his back against the wall and said, first thing is first. His statement was interrupted by another distant boom that he dimly recognized as Tsunade's enhanced blows. You have to find a way to try and lessen whatever the hell Tsunade slipped me. If I can't fight, we'll all be in big trouble. Tsunade is really underestimating how far Orochimaru has come over the years. Simply losing his arms won't make him any less dangerous. He was going to die because of that damn woman. As Shizun approached the man, her hands already glowing the recognizable green of healing chakra, she said, I'm not sure I can. Her skill still surpasses mine in several areas. Even after all this time, she still regularly comes up with concoctions that I can't solve. As he slipped down the wall to sit on the floor, the man urged, you have to try. Or she'll end up dead soon enough. In any case, what on earth was the woman thinking? It's one thing to avenge Orochimaru, but to attempt his murder on her own. And when did the man have backup on hand? What might have caused Tsunade to act so incredibly carelessly? He was lacking something in this situation. Furthermore, he was too busy to discover what it was. As the younger woman started working on him, Jiraiya exclaimed, we need to find Naruto. If things get too hairy, we'll need his help. In all honesty, he would much rather the boy stay out of the game for safety's sake. Even though the blonde had improved over the previous few months, he was in no way prepared to assist in a fight involving Orochimaru. The boy would still be unable to handle the Sannin even if he was hurt. The boy's life had already been hit by the snake Sannin, which was another factor. He did not, however, believe that they could overcome all of this without the boy's assistance. He wasn't feeling well, Tsunade wasn't feeling well, and he recalled that Shizun wasn't really a fighter to begin with. Naruto could be very helpful in the support category, at least as it stands. Perhaps even Shizune and Naruto's combined might be able to defeat this Kabuto figure. Then he and Tsunade could work together to make Orochimaru back off. At this point, that seemed to be the best possible outcome. He's already gone ahead. The Sannin didn't want to hear that. Angrily, he bit out, "What do you mean he's gone ahead?" The woman appeared uneasy all of a sudden. Her eyes darted off to the opposite wall and locked there. "I went to him first, looking for you, and told him of the problem. He mentioned that he had some talent as a censor and offered to help me. I told him, in the interest of saving time, to go look for Tsunade Sama while I continued to search for you." Jiraiya gave the woman a stern look. "You sent my young Chunin apprentice to look for Tsunade, knowing that she would probably be in battle against Orochimaru?" Shizune chuckled uneasily. Jiraiya gritted her teeth and said, "Seriously? What in the hell possessed you to do that? And what the hell was he thinking when he agreed?" She said nervously, I had kind of run off by that point. I didn't really give him the chance to say no. I was really worried about Tsunade Sama and he seemed like the fastest way to find her." As he struggled to get back up, Jiraiya came back, saying, "No, the explosions and violence are the fastest way to find her. That's just the fastest way to possibly get him killed." The woman defended it by saying, "Yes, but he's a Chunin, and so young. I figured that he would be able to handle himself. Like those other young prodigy ninjas the village produced." Jiraiya reached out to help him up and said, "He can. But not against the likes of Orochimaru. Hell, the man is already trying to kill the brat off before he gets too powerful. You just sent the boy headlong into a confrontation with a man who's been after his head for the past few months." The woman's face had turned pale once more. "Oh, I didn't know that part." The wise man gave a headshake. "No, I suppose you wouldn't." He inhaled deeply to regain his composure. "We have to hurry. Naruto can do some impressive things for his age. At least he'll give us the time to catch up and help them out. But as it stands, our only chance is for you and him to focus on that Kabuto guy so that we can all focus on running Orochimaru out of town." Right. She seemed to have a different attitude now that she had a path to follow. Tsunade Sama should keep him safe until then. "And she'll be able to fix whatever the hell she did to me," the man continued, "right?" I'm not sure. What a bitch's son." Tsunade's eyes narrowed at the impending danger. She prepared to face the sound ninja that was rapidly approaching by shifting her left foot back and balling her fist up at her sides. The wave of shuriken that slipped past her head caused her to blink in surprise. As they landed on the figure of Orochimaru's right hand man, the five suddenly tripled in size. Before his honed instincts took over, Kabuto himself blinked in disbelief. Before switching into a lateral body flicker that removed him from the Metal Star's path, the elite sound spy skidded to a stop. In the following instance, Naruto himself shushined his way toward the group and stopped close to the slug Sannin. The Chunin greeted the older blonde, saying, "Yo." His eyes immediately scanned the scene he had entered. "I finally found you, crazy lady." Still in disbelief at his unexpected arrival, Tsunade uttered the first thing that sprang to mind. "What the hell are you doing here, kid?" Naruto gave a snort. He glanced at the two other ninja nearby and said, "Looking for you." He pointed to the surrounding area, where several craters had formed on the ground that he was certain weren't there in the first place, and said, "Thanks for making it easy, by the way. Your temper makes itself pretty useful when you're busy trying to destroy the world with your punches." She shook her head in response, saying, "You can't be here. This isn't the kind of place for a kid like you." Naruto came back and said, "Tell that to your student. She's the one who came running into my training area like a bat out of hell. Demanded that I come find you while she went off looking for Jiraiya." Tsunade blinked once more before a frown appeared on her face. Shizune wouldn't have intervened, so she shouldn't have assumed that. "Naruto." When the two blondes looked up, they saw the sound ninja with silver hair. Kabuto looked at the blonde Chunin in front of him and cocked his head to the right inquiringly. A sardonic grin came to his face, and his left hand reached up and slid his glasses further up the bridge of his nose. The sound spy went on, "That is you. I almost didn't recognize you with those new clothes. And is that a Chunin vest? My goodness. Someone is moving up in the world." In response, Naruto bit out, "Kabuto. I was right then. How unsurprising." "Oh, so you knew I would be here?" barked the teen with silver hair. "I wonder how." Ignoring Kabuto's question, Naruto asked, "I'd like to know something as well. Were you always a sound spy or are you just another run-of-the-mill leaf trader?" Kabuto showed no signs of offense. Rather, he merely gave the blonde a small smile. He answered, "A little of both, to be honest. I was a leaf ninja for many years before Orochimaru." Sama converted me to his way of thinking. I was there on the ground floor for the creation of his own personal hidden village. So in a way you can argue that I am the first member of the Hidden Sound Village. Naruto went on to ask, and the little display in the first exam. If that was the case, why would those sound genin attack you? The teenager gave a shrug. What use is a spy if everyone knows his identity? Simpletons like those three aren't fit to know the inner workings of our vision. The snake Sanin looked at the blonde Chunin with obvious hatred and yelled, Kabuto! Stop talking to this fool. Kill him instead. Naruto gave an eye roll. Nice to see you too, weirdo. Orochimaru gave a ferocious hiss. The Chunin went on. I see the old man Hokage left you a parting gift. He pointed to the man's lanky, drooping arms and said, I wouldn't want you to leave Konoha with your tail between your legs and nothing else to show for it. As though he had developed an extra head, Tsunade gazed at the blonde boy. Orochimaru snarled, how you've managed to stay alive this long I can't even begin to imagine. I should have finished you off in that damn forest. Naruto frowned and asked, speaking of killing me, what is up with you putting a hit out on my head? Bone Guy was a damn handful to deal with. Orochimaru's eyes narrowed. If he weren't so incredibly creepy, the surprise in his voice would have been amusing. You fought Kimimaro-kun, and lived? Naruto replied, I saw that little trick with the seal too. You've given one to Uchiha Sasuke as well. Kabuto slid his glasses back up his face and interrupted, that's because he has actual talent, Naruto-kun. Unlike you, that is. Orochimaru. Sama's Juinjutsu is a gift for those who excel beyond the normal limitations of a shinobi. You on the other hand are nothing more than a beast wearing the skin of a man. And yet I'm the one who made Chunin. Naruto's response was prompt. His eyes remained fixed on the snake Sanin as he replied, he looked really talented getting his ass handed to him by his older brother just a few days ago. Lasted all about 10 seconds for all the help that seal of yours gave him. The snake Sanin hissed like a rattlesnake, enough talking fool, into the air. You'll die here and now. No more words need to be spoken. As Shiri entered the conversation, Tsunade growled, you won't touch this boy Orochimaru. I meant what I said, you'll die today. The yellow eyes had narrowed in hatred and rage. You are a fool, Tsunade. To reject my offer, they said. I will make you pay dearly for this. Like I would ever take such a foolish deal. You're the one who will pay for trying to use my loved ones against me. I heard what you did with my grandfather and great-uncle. I still have to give you an ass-kicking for that as well. Her fist clenched during the threat. The Sanin let out an angry roar before racing across the ground in their direction. His movements were a blur, and he was moving at a speed well above that of a typical shinobi. With her left fist cocked back behind her head, Tsunade sprang forward to meet his charge, more than prepared for him. In order to smash the man's brains against the back of his skull, the Slug Princess slammed her chakra. Powered punch forward. Orochimaru slid around the blonde woman and over to her exposed left side with unbelievably quick reflexes. In order to tear her spinal column out from behind, he lowered himself toward the back of her neck, opening his mouth wide and exposing his jaws to the air. But less than a second later, he jerked away as a single kunai flashed through the area where his head had been. Naruto retracted his arm from the throw and started flipping through a set of seals, saying, not happening like that. The hairs on the back of the blonde's neck stood on end, and newly trained battle instincts raged. Naruto spun on the balls of his feet and ducked into a crouch in a single fluid motion. As he stood up to face Kabuto, his right hand swung down and released one kunai. After failing to stab the boy in the back, the sound spy hopped backwards, bringing his own knife down to meet Naruto's rising stab. As the two younger ninjas started fighting, the sound of metal hitting metal reverberated throughout the atmosphere. At Kabuto's smirking face, Naruto exposed his teeth over the locked blades. Using his height and weight to gain the upper hand in the battle, the older ninja started to lean down into the deadlock. The teenager reprimanded the younger ninja, saying, you should have stayed out of things, Naruto-kun. Talentless shinobi like you always get cut down quickly when they enter battles they shouldn't have been anywhere near in the first place. Naruto grunted in response, then lowered his shoulders and thrust upward. Kabuto snapped out a front kick with his left foot, following the motion and letting himself be pushed backwards by the momentum. Before allowing his kunai to spin once on his middle finger to gather momentum as it sailed forward and towards the spy's face, Naruto quickly batted it to his right side with his free hand. As he knocked the knife away and brought his foot back to the ground, Kabuto's own arm blurred. He was able to look up in time to see Naruto creating seals much more quickly than he had ever witnessed a boy of his age do. Mizurapa, water trumpet for water release, is the suit. As the water ninjutsu rushed across the narrow gap between them, Kabuto frowned. He was taken out of the technique and the path, out of the blonde's range, by a body flicker backward and a juke to the right. Narrowing his eyes at the sound spy, Naruto interrupted the jutsu before his well-known cross-shaped seal activated. Before they hurried forward to meet the older ninja, two shadow clones appeared on either side of the blonde. Before a Shushin brought him back to ground zero and into the two clones' path. Kabuto smiled. He dodged the first one's left hook before sweeping his kunai back in retaliation. When three shuriken came crashing down on the older ninja, he was forced to abandon the attack, and the clone's brother saved it. As his gaze strayed to the side to concentrate on the other battle nearby, the real Naruto had been using this time to come up with a strategy. Tsunade was rapidly readjusting to her previous situation and had bounced back well from it. Despite the absence of conflict over the years, she swooped past Orochimaru's innumerable stirks. The woman turned sideways to avoid a wad of something vile that had escaped from the snake summoner's mouth, and the blonde Chunin watched. In order to avoid Tsunade's retaliation, which took the form of a chakra-infused chop aimed at his neck, Orochimaru had to abruptly shift his body to the left. Naruto was reminded of his own combat situation by the swift dispelling of both of his clones. As the boy absorbed the memories of his clone's unexpected defeat, a frown split his face. Before he abruptly charged forward and continued the attack, Kabuto had been forced to drop his kunai due to the combined attack of both shadow clones. As he dodged a barrage of jabs, a faint, barely perceptible glow covered both of his hands, and he then swung both open palms across his assailant's chest. Juken? As Kabuto straightened up and casually started to get closer to the blonde asked himself. No, somehow, it was different. There was only one thing to see. In such a scenario, taijutsu ought to be the last resort. Let us avoid being struck by those hands. A few feet away from the blonde, Kabuto stopped and remarked, I'm impressed, Naruto-kun. Your tactics have changed and your moves have become quite sharp. I can honestly admit it was more than what I had been expecting. It seems that you've been training hard in an attempt to catch up to Sasuke-kun. For as much good as it will do you. Naruto remarked sardonically, yeah, well, I live to surprise people. Neat trick you have there, with the gentle fist knock off. Kabuto pushed his glasses up once more and gave a small laugh. In response, the teenager said, oh no, it's simply my chakra no metsu. Used primarily for operations, of course. But the highly skilled individuals like myself can use it in combat situations as well. Oh, a medical technique? Naruto asked, his thoughts racing with potential attack strategies. I didn't peg you for someone who studied the medical arts. Kabuto shrugged and said, but of course. Who else would know the best ways to kill their adversaries? My knowledge of the human body has allowed me to quickly dispatch of Lord Orochimaru's enemies wherever they may be. Naruto answered, I'll keep that in mind. Just another thing to add to the book of useful tips I've picked up over these past few months. Kabuto smirked as his hands started to glow once more and declared, a book that will do you no good. I'll kill you here and now. As his hands formed a seal, Naruto began to respond, yeah, not going to happen. It's you who's about to bite the dust. Kabuto grinned in response to the news. Oh, does the talentless hack have more tricks up his sleeve? As he started to form hand seals, Naruto growled and bit out, a few. You'll like this one a lot. With the intention of killing the boy before he could complete his ninjutsu, Kabuto narrowed his eyes at the blonde before sprinting forward at twice the speed he had displayed thus far. But Naruto had completed his seals in time to launch both palms out, so he was prepared for it. Wind release. Gale Wind Palm, Fuden. Reposho. With twice the force an average ninja could muster, the blonde's preferred wind technique raced towards the approaching sound spy. As the chakra-generated winds ripped at him at a breakneck speed, Kabuto's eyes widened. Using a half-seal with his left hand, the Rouge Leaf Ninja was able to replace it with a nearby fragment of debris from the nearby historic castle's demolished wall. However, Naruto had anticipated that as well and had started to create a set of hand seals long before Kabuto reappeared. As he started using the technique to fill the ground beneath his feet with his own life force, his chakra soared to great heights and transformed into a physical force that momentarily rose into the air. The blonde lowered himself to his knees and slammed both open palms on the floor after he had held out both arms akimbo for half a second. Consume this fucking idiot. Move your ass, lady. Oh. Jiraiya turned toward the next boom and managed a smile. That's something. With wide eyes and a gaping mouth, Shizune, who had accompanied the man to the top of the motel to try to find the location of the battle, gazed off into the distance. As she gazed out over the distant battlefield, she hardly managed to spit out, what is that? Jiraiya's smile grew twice as big. He began, that is Naruto showing off. Come on, we know where we have to be. Tsunade was a seasoned and well-traveled kunyachi who had witnessed numerous potent techniques over the years. She had seen firsthand the power of Salamander Hanzo during the Second Great War, when he wreaked havoc on the forces advancing on his homeland. She could honestly claim to have witnessed the Sandaime Hokage's power at its height. His technical prowess and combination techniques outstripped those of his predecessors. The Sand's Setetsu, Kumo's lightning armor, even the Mist Village's Juki Bui. But in all her years, she had never witnessed anything as both deadly and awe-inspiring. She wasn't sure what to anticipate when Naruto, the boy, yelled for her to leave. Perhaps a fire ninjutsu, a large-scale earth ninjutsu, or something enhanced by the Kyuubi's chakra, would have allowed his Uzumaki clan ancestry to be revealed through sheer willpower. Instead, she discovered one of the most exquisite sights she had ever seen in her ninja career. As soon as her feet had landed at the boy's side, the technique had begun. As the boy's ninjutsu started to take shape, the ground moaned and cracks started to show. She had glanced to her right to give the boy a disappointed look during the brief silence before she was drawn back to the area in front of them by another sound. She then immediately realized what made Uzumaki Naruto so unique. Before glistening spires of brilliant crystals soared into the sky, the ground started to surge upward without any other warning. With wide eyes, she watched as the rainbow-colored structures violently tore apart the ground. Knife. Sharp spears shot into the air and charged at the two ninja in opposition. A chakra-powered leap lifted Kabuto off the ground and out of the path of destruction, causing him to blanch in surprise. However, Naruto just smiled before focusing and pressing more chakra into the ground. Immediately, the spire's path started to bend in the direction of the Sound Ninja's retreat, heading to the spot where he had arrived to land directly beside his master. With wide eyes, Orochimaru gazed at the impending assault before turning to yell something at his companion, but his words were drowned out by the sound of the destructive technique. Holding her breath, Tsunade saw the ninjutsu crash into the spot where the two men had been standing before continuing straight ahead without making any slight detours. The blonde let out the technique with a sigh, halting the wave of destruction cold. But her heart stopped somewhere in her chest. Was that successful? Was it true that the boy killed them? As soon as the thought came to her, she pushed it away. No matter how unexpected it must have been for the man, Orochimaru was too skilled to have perished at the hands of such a thing. He had to have a plan to get them both out of danger even though he lacked ninjutsu. Nevertheless, it was quite impressive. This was a child of some sort. When she saw the incredible destructive power in front of them, she finally managed to exhale, asking, "What was that?" Lightly panting, Naruto stood up, the tenketsu in his arms tingling a little from the intense chakra he had to channel through them. He kept his focus on the space in front of him, but he cocked his head sideways to look at the woman out of the corner of his left eye. Crystal release. Crystal spire wave. Shoten. Keshou Sentu Nami. Shoten. As she continued to gaze at the devastation in front of her, she freely confessed, "I've never heard of that before." A Kekkei Genkai? Naruto said, "Yes. In truth it's a much smaller technique that only creates one. But I figured I'd keep pumping chakra into it and see how that goes. Focus on making as many as possible and simply forcing it in their direction. Go for mass area as opposed to pinpoint damage." Ah. The woman nodded in agreement as she absorbed his words. It sounded as though he had spontaneously switched an established technique into something fresh. In any combat scenario, much less one this serious, it would be extremely foolish to do this. However, it seemed to have worked out pretty well in this case. It is impressive. In response, Naruto squinted and shut his eyes, grunting. Her gaze followed the magnificent scene, speculating about what the onlookers in the distance might have seen. It must have taken a staggering amount of chakra to use a technique this large. She was aware from her time in the military that many of these sophisticated Kekkei Genkai techniques required far more chakra than most ninja could have used. Furthermore, the boy had just come clean about altering an established method without any prior practice. In order to make sure it worked, she could imagine that he might have gone overboard with the chakra requirements. As she started to make sense of the idea, she managed to grind out, "How's your reserves? I hope the boy had some pills for soldiers." "None at all. Can you keep going?" The blonde opened his eyes and gave her a sidelong glance before his face lit up with surprise when he understood exactly what she was asking. At the question the woman asked on his behalf, he gave a slight shake of his head. The man started to explain to the woman, "Fine. Don't worry about that. I have more than enough chakra left. I can do something like that about 4 more times at this rate." Her expression was one of disbelief as she turned to look at him. He had to be kidding when he said, "Surely you jest. In terms of chakra requirements, that technique was at least a B rank. At his age, he could not possibly have that much chakra, In fact, the majority of Junin lacked the chakra necessary to perform such an action more than twice. The boy gave a shrug. I've always had a wealth of chakra. Even as an academy student I had more than every Chunin in the village. He opened his hands to release some of the tension in his body. Old man Hokage told me just a few months ago that he didn't have my kind of chakra reserves until he was in his early 20s. And the old pervert said he couldn't match me until the end of the Second Great War. She was unable to resist. The blonde Chunin beside her caused Tsunade to gape openly. Her mind was blown away by what he was saying, and her mind was racing. It was not possible. She simply couldn't believe what the boy was saying. How was that amount of chakra possible for a mere Chunin? Especially a rookie who hadn't reached puberty yet. Then she added, that can't be. That just doesn't seem plausible. As he returned his attention to his technique's efforts, the blonde snorted at her. You're talking to a second-generation Jinchuriki who comes from a clan noted for having insane chakra capacity and stamina. Not to mention that I have a cage for a father, was trained by another, and have been spending pretty much every day for the last 3 months using an ass load of shadow clones to work on chakra control and elemental transformation techniques. A whole bunch of shadow clones? How could that possibly mean anything? She needed to inquire. What does that amount to? And ass load. As he clenched his fist and closed his eyes once more, he answered candidly, it means that back in my first few months as a genin I did nothing but span hundreds of clones in an attempt to simply wail on whoever was in front of me. She tried to say something more, but she was unable to do so, choosing to return to the crystal technique instead. The boy could, of course, casually discard B-rank ninjutsu as if it were becoming obsolete. He would not be a typical Chunin in any way. How had she gotten herself into this situation? As he started using his chakra sensing abilities, the blonde freely confessed, I don't feel them. Do you think that actually managed to kill them? The woman turned and stared at him icily. He could see it without even using his eyes. Yeah. Stupid question. The crucial task of determining exactly where they had gone was left behind. As he tried to locate them, Naruto kept using his senses to the fullest extent possible. He had decided to employ such a large-scale strategy in an attempt to destabilize their adversaries and make them go on the defensive. However, it seemed that he had only succeeded in letting them slip past their notice. They were unable to ascend. They would be visible to us. The blonde started thinking for himself. Some sort of genjutsu? Maybe a body flickering away from the attack site? Or did they take a different route? It came to him too late. The boy didn't catch the attack until the very last second, even after flooding the ground beneath his feet with an absurd amount of chakra. Directly beneath his feet, Orochimaru's foul chakra started to rise quickly, too quickly for him to mount any kind of defense, and his heart lurched deep inside his chest. Not too quick for Tsunade, though. His eyes had opened, and the woman had watched him look at the ground. She quickly grabbed the boy by the scruff of his vest with her right hand before flinging him violently to the side. With his mouth agape and a flash of metal in his throat, Orochimaru exploded from the earth. As she cleared space for herself and moved out of the way of any potential counterattack, Tsunade's body flickered to the side. She soon discovered, however, that she was not in danger. Orochimaru, unfazed by the abrupt escape, twisted his neck sharply in that direction before turning his vile eyes to the falling blonde. Naruto slammed into the ground and rolled back head over heels before landing on his back, his eyes widening even more when he saw the swiftly approaching blade being held out to his chest. As Tsunade witnessed death looming over the boy through impalement on Orochimaru's renowned Kusanagi, her breath caught in her throat. For the second time in the last 5 minutes, the blonde Chunin from Konoha caught her off guard as her body was in the middle of changing into another, but obviously pointless, Shushin. Naruto did the first thing that came to mind to save his life because he had no way to stand up and nothing to stop the attack. He pushed it away. Tsunade's eyes widened as he saw the blonde's right hand swiftly rise up and twist his body sharply to the left. Before forming into a sphere of pure life energy, a visible chakra flashed in the boy's palm. For everyone to see, it rotates. Not possible, however, it wasn't. Rasengan, sphere of the spiral. Tsunade and Orochimaru watched with bated breath as the boy startled her once more. When the Yondaime Hokage's renowned ninjutsu struck the flat side of Orochimaru's fabled sword, it screeched like a bat out of hell. Before the ninjutsu's strength and force slammed the blade off to the boy's left side and away from his body, Tsunade briefly believed the boy's efforts would be in vain. Along with the momentum, Orochimaru's neck was violently jerked, and the sudden movement caused him to cough, leaving his neck exposed and vulnerable. No hesitation on Tsunade's part. The woman's body was a blur, not much different from the snake Sanin's earlier, and she had quickly crossed the distance. She straightened her right hand into an open palm. Chakra started to apply a thin layer to the outside of her hand. As she pushed more chakra into her open hand, she concentrated her earth elemental chakra to create a blunt edge, determined to use sheer force to chop the man's head off at the neck. However, a wave of fire caught her attention out of the corner of her left eye, forcing her to abort at the last second. Frustration and rage filled the woman as she cartwheeled off to the side with agility that defied her age. As Orochimaru swiftly pulled his sword and neck back, Kabuto's fire ninjutsu struck the ground where she had just been. Damn it. Almost had him. Fuck, Naruto yelled as he quickly rolled onto his stomach and forced himself up to his feet. That was close. Tsunade eyed the blonde over the short distance between them with irritation. He didn't need to remind her of that. I can say the same thing to you, Naruto-kun. Kabuto snarled from his position. You nearly skewered us with that last one. Naruto bared his teeth at the older boy. Yeah well, just doing my part as a talentless hack. Kabuto eyed him with a wild look. I'm sure. How? Orochimaru cut in with his demand. His own yellow eyes radiant fury as his killing intent filled the area. Tsunade and Naruto both grimaced as the pressure hit them, but neither faltered. Both having felt the Sanin's presence before. Besides, Naruto had come up against far worse with the Ichibi. How did you get that technique? Naruto eyed the pale-skinned shinobi. I was born with it. Duh. His tone reminding Tsunade of a teenage girl talking to her out-of-touch parents. If at all possible, it seemed as if Orochimaru's rage and killer intent doubled. Born with it? The snake Sanin grounded out? You? Naruto sneered back in response. Everyone is good at something. Me? It's making giant crystals out of nothing. Tsunade had to hand it to the boy. He was an expert at pissing other people off. Orochimaru howled in anger as Kabuto stepped up to his side, his own gaze focused on the blonde Chunin. It seems as if Guren's talents weren't as unique to her as we'd like to believe. The silver-haired teenager imparted on to his superior. Perhaps we can use Naruto-kun's dead body to further our understanding of the specifics. Tsunade grimaced even further at the threat. They were talking about using the boy's cadaver to steal his Kekkei Genkei. It was just the kind of thing she had come to expect from Orochimaru. So it didn't necessarily surprise her that the man's subordinate was just like him in that regard. Perhaps you can shut the hell up. Naruto responded with a classic comeback. Damn, that boy was good. Kabuto's gaze went darker. Perhaps. He replied low before a spark of chakra shot into the air. Tsunade opened her mouth to shout out a warning as Kabuto darted forward towards the blonde Chunin. But it was unnecessary. The blonde boy had slapped his hands together and released the restriction seals that coated his body before Kabuto had made it into range. The sound spy blinked in surprise as the blonde leaf Chunin had darted back in a hop with near double the speed he had shown up to that point. Still he made to continue his attack, swiping his chakra-coated palms at the boy. Back to it then. Tsunade reasoned as she watched Orochimaru burrow back underground. She began to rapidly form seals for one of the few elemental ninjutsu she regularly used during her time as an active kunyachi. A technique that stopped before from sneaking around underground. Better not let him get the drop on the boy. Doden. Kaido Shukutsu, Earth Release, Open Earth Rising Excavation. The slug Sanin grinned as Orochimaru was forcefully expelled into the air and out of hiding. The snake summoner snarled in rage as he caught sight of the woman forming another set of hand seals in an attempt to finish him off. He contorted his body as best as he could, his leg snapping out into a kick that elongated. Tsunade calmly sidestepped the counter before she raised her left hand to her lips and took a deep breath. Kabuto. The auto leader shouted as Tsunade's chakra began to rise up to her throat. Get her. It was far too late to help him. Kaden. Goryuka, Fire Release, Great Dragon Fire. Kabuto snapped his head around in time to see the fire ninjutsu race free of the slug princess's lips. The massive dragon-shaped projectile roared in silent rage as it raced up into the sky to meet the falling snake summoner. Shit. The silver-haired ninja turned around as he began to think of ways to help his master. If Orochimaru-sama had the use of his arms, this wouldn't be an issue. No you don't, barked Naruto as he dashed towards Kabuto's backside. The sound ninja gritted his teeth as he was forced to turn back around, the sound of Orochimaru's scream raising the hair on the back of his neck up. He was going to pay for missing that one later. You're annoying. The leaf trader grounded out through clenched teeth as he thrusted another palm toward his younger opponent. Much to his surprise, instead of dodging to the side, like the boy had been doing thus far, the blonde Chunin simply raised his right arm and battled the strike away at the forearm with his wrist. Kabuto instantly took note of the heavy coating that had spread onto the boy's limbs, recognizing it for what it was. It's just like Gurren. The silver-haired teenager realized with a grimace as he knocked a punch aimed for his face aside with an open palm. I can't get through this damn armor. It was one of things that had always annoyed him about sparring with his now dead comrade. This crystallized armor served as a buffer against the damage his chakra scalpels could do. It didn't totally negate it, but it still did enough so that the attacks weren't instantly debilitating. Still, it didn't mean that he couldn't kill the boy through other means. The two young ninja began to trade blows, and it quickly became apparent to Naruto that despite the release of his restriction seals and the extra strength that had been granted to him by his crystal armor, Kabuto was still far too skilled for him to take on in taijutsu. The glasses-wearing ninja didn't do anything overly impressive, but his blocks were clean and his counters were flawless. It was obvious to the blonde that the only reason he hadn't been killed yet was the defensive protection given to him by his armor. Gotta break off again. I'm curious. Naruto began as he attempted to think of a way to make space again. Where did you get your training from? I can't see someone like Snakeface taking the time to teach you anything useful like medical ninjutsu. Kabuto narrowed his gaze at the boy but still chose to answer. A little bit from all kinds of place. Mostly from a branch of the Leaf Village that someone like you wouldn't know anything about. Naruto frowned at the answer as he slipped a strike that was aimed for his neck. The words the Toad Sage had said days before coming back to the forefront. It couldn't be that simple, could it? In the end, he figured that if Kabuto was half the spy he claimed to be, he probably already knew about the supposedly secret organization. Did you mean Root? The blonde hedged. Because I know about that. A flash of surprise spread across Kabuto's face before a dark grin came into play. You surprise me yet again. He punctuated the words by slapping aside two straight jabs with either hand before lashing out a chakra-infused kick that knocked the blonde Chunin onto his back. I wonder who told you that. Naruto grimaced but didn't answer as he rolled to his left in an effort to avoid Kabuto descending onto him with another swipe. The blonde hopped to his feet as Kabuto came barreling back at him. Naruto ducked past another swipe before he exploded forward into a right straight that Kabuto simply leaned sideways to avoid. The grin on the silver-haired teenager's face grew wider and Naruto felt worry creep into his body. Aw shit. Before the blonde could realize what had changed, Kabuto had struck. The sound spy darted forward into the blonde's guard and swiped a hand just under the armpit. Naruto's eyes went wide and he yelled in surprise as a wave of intense pain erupted from the spot. Got you. Kabuto intoned as he calmly slid his glasses back up his face with his right hand, watching as Naruto darted backwards. Took me quite a bit longer than it should have. The blonde said nothing in return, instead focusing on trying to force back the pain in his arm. Naruto tried in vain to raise his left arm to grab at the spot when he found out that he couldn't move the limb at all. His eyes went wide as he quickly figured out what had gone wrong. Don't tell me. Here's something to note. Kabuto calmly declared as he grinned maliciously at the blonde. Just because you have armor doesn't make you invincible. You've forgotten already that someone who worked for Orochimaru Sama had the same kind of talent that you did. That means we've had ample time to look over its strengths and weaknesses. Son of a bitch. He cut my fucking tendons. The biggest mistake you made was getting in close range. The spy continued to taunt. Just because that armor greatly reduces damage doesn't mean it completely eliminates it. I've faced it enough time to know that the crystal techniques have a weakness in the form of pure chakra. Wind, water, lighting, and even some types of fire. All of these types can cut through the armor if the chakra added to it is strong enough. Or in this case, I did it with pure medical chakra. Good to know. Naruto managed to reply through clenched teeth as struggled to keep his breathing in check through the overwhelming pain. It was official. This was the worst thing he had felt up to this point. Just pure hell. I'll remember that for next time. Except for the fact that there won't be a next time. Kabuto retorted. I'm going to simply slit your throat right here and now. You won't get a chance to put what you've learned today to the test. You sure about that? Naruto responded as he turned his body to raise his good arm in defense. Yes, but don't worry. The older boy's grin had become deranged. Your body will lead to many great advancements for Orochimaru Sama. It's pure luck that we found someone like you after we lost Gurren's body. Who knows, maybe the Kyuubi will save a spot in hell for you. Didn't anyone ever tell you that it was a bad idea to count your chickens before they hatch? No, Kabuto replied shortly. Didn't anyone tell you that it was bad form to act like you had the advantage when you were about to die? Nope. But it's something I'll take into account for when that time comes. Kabuto opened his mouth reply before his eyes went wide, staring at something over the blonde's left shoulder. Naruto didn't bother to turn around, having felt the Toad Sage's approach moments before. The blonde Chunin resisted the urge to grin at the shocked look on the sound spy's face as Jiraiya came up to a stop behind him. "You alright, kid?" the Sannin rumbled quietly as he eyed the sound spy. "Nope," Naruto shouted as Jiraiya attempted to put his hand on his shoulder, darting away from the limb. "Fucker just cut my tendons. My damn shoulder is on fire. Can't move my arm." Darkness flashed in Jiraiya's eyes as he took a glance at his young pupil before he nodded. He turned his attention back over his own shoulder to where Tsunade's apprentice had stalked up behind him in complete silence. "Shizune," he began as Kabuto darted away. "Take care of Naruto's arm for me. Then come join us." His gaze had become focused on the sight of a practically charred Orochimaru stabbing away at Tsunade's darting form with the tip of his sword extending from his mouth. "If there's anything left, that is." The woman quietly gave her agreement as she stepped around the man and came up by Naruto's opposite side. The blonde Chunin allowed himself to drop to one knee as the pain in his arms began to intensify. A half-seal with his good hand managed to dispel his crystal armor as he took in a shuddering breath. "Hey kid," Jiraiya added as he started to step towards the battle. "You finished the Rasengan?" Naruto grunted as the pain began to flare. "Already showed it off." "Good job." The man complimented with a hard look in his eyes. "Now let me finish this shit so that we can go home." Naruto remained silent as he agreed. Home sounded like a great idea right about now. This trip had really sucked. I want him dead. As Kabuto followed his master into the throne room, he cast a sidelong glance at one of the two guards stationed on either side of the doorway. The silver-haired medical ninja jerked his head in the direction of the entrance and added, "Of course Orochimaru-sama." Knowing what happened to inquisitive guards in Otto, the two guards obeyed the unspoken order without protest. The best course of action was to act as though nothing had been heard or seen. Otherwise, your mother might be the next person on an operating table. The Sannin marched to the high-backed stone chair at the far end of the room and continued to rant, "And I don't just mean dead. I want for him to suffer painfully. I want for him to die in terror." The right-hand man of the snake Sannin answered patiently, "I know Orochimaru-sama. He's a troublesome boy." As though he hadn't heard his assistant, the snake Sannin went on, "We need a plan, Kabuto. Some way to ensure that the boy meets his end." Silently, Kabuto said, "Yes sir." In all honesty, his desire for Naruto's death was equal to or perhaps greater than Orochimaru's. However, in contrast to his superior, he failed to see the benefits of a furious tirade. He and his information-gathering abilities had been humiliated by the boy. It didn't matter where the child learned so much so quickly. Kabuto was tense because he had made such progress in such a short period of time. Before he became even more of a problem, the boy had to pass away. As he collapsed onto his stone throne, the snake Sannin exclaimed, "If I had been able to use my arms, I would have done it myself. Damn that old bastard Sarutobi." Kabuto slid his hand up his face and adjusted his glasses before saying, "I'm sorry, Orochimaru-sama, but there isn't anything we can do with medical ninjutsu. Tsunade was our last hope and it appears as if she won't be of any use to us either." The pale man yelled, "I'm well aware of that, Kabuto." "Of course you are, sir," Orochimaru said. "I'll have to abandon this body. It was already beginning to break down on me before Sarutobi's damn jutsu. But now I have no choice but to take action quickly." Kabuto scowled. "Have you any idea of who you'd like to choose?" His teeth were exposed by the snake Sannin. "No, ideally I'd have the Sharingan from Sasuke-kun, but he's currently out of my reach. And taking his body at this point wouldn't do me any good in the first place. His body is still much too young and underdeveloped. It would break down on me in just a few years as well." Kabuto went on, "You'll need to solve that problem. Make sure that his body is in prime form so that it will last you." "I know that. But in order to do so I'll need to get him here first." The medical nin gave a shrug. "You can just continue on with your originally plan. It's clear that his desire for revenge far outweighs everything else. Tempt him with the promise of power and he'll come running to you. His ties in the Leaf Village are easily severed. Even the other Uchiha still in the village wouldn't be enough to keep him in Konoha." "Yes." Orochimaru nodded, a thoughtful expression spreading across his face. "I'll need to make sure he sees this as his best opportunity to gain the power he's been desperately searching for. Then he'll come to me without much complaint." Kabuto reminded his superior, "But that's still a ways off. You'll need something in the meantime. Perhaps one of the sound elites?" Orochimaru frowned. As the Sannin's eyes darkened, something flashed across his face. "No, those fools wouldn't do much good in terms of a new body. The only one of that entire group that I would have even considered would have been Kimimaro, and his illness won't allow for me to take his body." Speaking of which, remind me to punish that fool for keeping secrets. Why would he not tell me that wretched child had the shoten? The urge to roll his eyes was too strong for Kabuto to resist. He reminded the man calmly, I told you that pushing him to join the invasion force was a bad idea. He knew Orochimaru would ignore his complaints anyhow, so he said, most likely because he fell into a coma the moment he crossed into our borders, sir. Orochimaru directed his scowl at his helper. Without fear, Kabuto looked him in the eyes. The Sannin turned away, frowning in frustration once more. I'll need to choose someone else. Maybe one of the prisoners. The medic nodded and thought, that would be wise. We've captured some really talented shinobi over the years. I'm sure you can choose the most fitting out of them. The body should serve to be a suitable stopgap until Sasuke's can be safely taken over. Orochimaru nodded, considering the possibilities, a battle royal. Tempt them with the idea of freedom and then take the winner's body for my own. The comment from Kabuto was, a sound plan, sir. Should I make the arrangements? Orochimaru exclaimed, yes. See to it, and in the meantime I'll think of a way to get rid of the Kyuubi brat. Kabuto explained, actually, I believe I've come up with a few choices. He had spent the last few days thinking carefully about how he was going to get rid of that annoying leaf brat in the most agonizing way possible. A few rather devious schemes. Oh, do tell. Of course, but some will take time. For now I believe we should first try the easy approach. An eyebrow was raised by the pale Sannin, and what does that involve? Kabuto grinned ruthlessly in the dim light. Why, simply paying someone to kill him, of course. Phase 8 war drums. A persistent pounding on Naruto's door roused him. The blonde Shunin dragged himself out of bed with a sigh that was equal parts frustration and annoyance. He glanced quickly at the clock on his bedside table. The time was a little after 6:30. As he swung open his bedroom door and strode toward the grating noise, a frown split his face. He was meant to take this week off. With a good idea of who it was on the other side, the blonde grabbed the handle and swung it open roughly. He yelled, what, damn it, at the man who had disturbed his slumber. Yes. Jiraiya. At this hour of the morning, the Sannin's shout, hey Gaki, was excessively loud and joyous. I almost thought you weren't home. In his face, Naruto slammed the door. That was rude, kid. The blonde leaned his forehead against the wooden door, closed his eyes, and prayed for patience. Naturally, Jiraiya would sneak in through a window and knock on his door using a shadow clone. It was the quintessential Jiraiya move, known as the greatest method to irritate Naruto on this particular day. Naruto turned to the man and said again, what, damn it, what are you doing here? The man, who was lounging in one of the blonde's two comfortable armchairs, waved joyfully. The Sannin exclaimed, just wanted to say hi, before surveying the apartment. The Toad Sage's mouth blew a low whistle. Nice place, kid. How could someone like you land an apartment like this? Naruto walked over to the man and said, and get your damn feet off my coffee table, by being the village pariah who was thrown out of the orphanage for disturbing the other children at the age of 7. The Sannin chose to smirk at the boy instead of doing so. Jiraiya persisted, saying, well, at least you got a cool-looking pad for you troubles. 2 rooms, a full bathroom, fully stocked kitchen, living room and dining room. Not to mention the veranda. I know houses that aren't this nice. Naruto pointed to the room and said, it is the top floor. Penthouse apartment. Kinda had to be nice by definition. The wise man nodded and said, that does make sense. I take it you're the reason this entire high-rise is practically empty? Of course. I own the place. The man was caught off guard by that. Jiraiya blinked. Own it? This entire building? Naruto gave a shrug. The Hokage was adamant I get a place here because it was close to the academy. I just thought he would take care of the little things for me. I know now that he just used your students' money to buy it from the stingy landlord. So I'd always have a place to stay. Jiraiya muttered, I see. During his years as a shinobi, Minato had amassed a substantial fortune. Mostly, of course, from missions, and the man was pretty thrifty. Kushina was also too arrogant to ask him for anything. It was simple to understand how Sarutobi would have kept the money until the appropriate moment. And the best justification was to give the boy a place to call home. When people learned that the Kyuubi boy would be residing there, the building's value most likely fell. The old Hokage had made an astute move. I'd actually forgotten that their old house was destroyed. Naruto deadpanned, there was a giant fox on top of it. How could you possibly forget something like that? Offended, Jiraiya replied, I don't spend a lot of time in the village. I didn't come back for a while after the Kyuubi's assault. Naruto tried to refocus the conversation by asking, was there something you needed? Some profound reason for waking me up this early on one of my supposed days off? Or are you just here to waste what little time I've had to myself over the past few months? The sage let the topic shift and said, I told you, I just wanted to say hi. By the way, it was far too easy to sneak into this place. You should think about setting up some kind of defenses. Traps or something. Wouldn't want any two-bit assassin to kill you in your sleep. Mockingly, Naruto exclaimed, that's a great idea. As he strode into the kitchen. It would go a long way to keeping uninvited guests out. Like you. You're a barrel of laughs right now. As he reached for a cabinet next to his kitchen sink, the boy joked, I was actually going for, obviously pissed. The Sannin went on, so anyway, I noticed you haven't been to any of the celebrations. With a glass of water in his left hand, Naruto approached a wall and leaned casually, asking, what's there to celebrate? It's just a grumpy old alcoholic being sworn into a position that you cheated and tricked her into taking. People are running around like world peace has just been declared. No, people are running around like strong leadership has just been established. Jiraiya responded. The kind of thing they've been lacking in the past month. He makes the statement, I don't know if I consider the old hag strong leadership, with air quotes. The only thing needed to get her to do a favor for you is swing for a bottle of good sake and promise her you'll pick up a lottery ticket in her name. Jiraiya gently reprimanded him, saying, you should have more respect for your new Hokage. Insubordination is grounds for execution. If only I'd be so lucky. A chance to escape her rule through death. Priceless. The Sannin smiled. Just admit it. You like having her around. Naruto scowled. Sure. I like it just as much as I like a tick stuck to the back of my throat. You two are so much alike it's kinda scary. Both of you are sarcastic smart asses. Both get upset at the smallest things. And both of you hold little respect for other people. The wise man's grin broadened. I can see how close the two of you have gotten over the past 10 days. The blonde scowled more deeply. His shoulders shrugged as he said, she's alright I guess. Not the completely bitter bitch I first thought she was when she was throwing me into a damn tree. The response caused Jiraiya to shake his head. That's another thing. Both of you are too stubborn for your own good. She said something along the line of, he's not the complete idiot I originally figured him for, which is pretty much the same thing. The blonde tried to interrupt this awkward thought pattern by saying, so anyhow, you keep dodging around why you've really come here. Care to get on with the important stuff? Uncertainty flashed across the toad sage's face, and his smile vanished in an instant. Over the edge of his glass, Naruto observed silently as the man appeared to have trouble thinking. The sage sighed deeply at last, then raised his head to meet the young leaf shinobi's eyes. I've heard some disturbing things over the past few days, really troubling stuff. Naruto scowled but remained silent, letting the man finish his sentence. In truth I feel kinda guilty. If I'd known things had taken such a sharp turn for the worse in the time since we left the village I wouldn't have forced Tsunade into that little bet. It's completely unfair of me to put her in this situation. When I wanted for her to take on the role of Hokage I just assumed everything would work out for the best. Instead it seems like everything has been getting worse. The blonde made an awkward shuffle. What's the problem? Jiraiya declared, the problem is Suna and Otto. Things look to be heading down a dark path pretty quickly. Naruto unabashedly acknowledged, I don't understand. He failed to see what the Sannin was discussing. How are things going? When the sage finally said, we think that the invasion on the village was only the first step. In the few weeks since the attack on the village Suna has been getting antsy. Testing the borders of river country and the like. And we all know that Orochimaru is still dangerous. He proved that 10 days ago. As he drained the last of his drink, Naruto asked, what kind of trouble could they be trying to make? Didn't the beating here show them up? Jiraiya answered, no, that was only the opening act. I personally think the Kazekage knew that it would be a failed attempt. But he went along with it anyway in an effort to show a measure of good faith to Orochimaru. It's the reason why you saw so few sand ninja compared to their sound counterparts. Suna sent just enough of a force to show Orochimaru support but still kept a bulk of their numbers at hand. They also sent only a few of their highly skilled combatants into the field. That wasn't a full-on assault so much as it was a warning shot. After giving the man's words some thought, the blonde took them seriously. Using the lessons he had learned from the Sandaime Hokage during his brief training with the man, he started to make sense of what the Sannin was saying. The blonde Shunin thought the Kazekage sounded like a clever guy. Naruto shouted out, Orochimaru was allowed to get so close to the old man by impersonating the Kazekage. That was the perfect disguise. Jiraiya nodded and said, yep. The old man knew it of course but couldn't risk calling Orochimaru out on it. Our forces still needed to get into place and we had no idea of the true strength of our invaders. I actually spent around the first 30 minutes of the fight, before I came by and grabbed you, searching for any sign of the real Kazekage hiding amongst the normal sand shinobi. It was just our luck that he decided to simply stay in Suna. Having him around during the attack would have been hell. Naruto's lips were pursed. The blonde said, "This is going to get really bad, and very fast." After a moment of hesitation, Jiraiya nodded, "Yeah, kid." The boy asked, "And how's the old lady taking it? She can't be enjoying having something like this dropped into her lap as soon as she agreed to the position." Jiraiya turned her head away. "Like I said before, I wouldn't have offered if I'd known. She's not happy about it, but she's making do. We had ideas about what could happen, but no one saw this coming so quickly. Despite the hard things she said a while back, I know for a fact that she loves this village. Most of her clan gave their lives to see it thrive and grow. She won't let her grandfather's dream die away so quickly." Before his face hardened and his eyes returned to the boy, the sage scowled. The sage declared, "Tsunade knows war, kid. She fought through 2 of them at my side. I know for a fact that she can get us through this. And she's taken the challenge head on. I haven't seen her this motivated in well over a damn decade. But motivation can only take you so far." "Exactly. Which is why we've got some things to get into order." Before he sat down in the other armchair with a sigh, the blonde crossed the gap between them. Naruto put his hands together and muttered, "This is like a real war. A real war like in the academy books." "Not yet, it isn't," said the Sannin. "This, as it stands, is just a problem between 3 shinobi factions. We can take on Suna and Otto, of that I have no doubt. But it's what could come after that has us so worked up and worried. Or rather I should say would happen." Even though Naruto knew the answer, he still asked, "And what is that?" Then Jiraiya said menacingly, "The 4th Great Shinobi War." The man was uneasy about the notion that, if we can't take care of things quickly, we may be legitimately looking at the next great conflict on this continent. He'd survived 2 of these nightmares already. Would he make it through a 3rd? On that front, the boy didn't need to know how he felt. Naruto remained silent for a while before a small smile appeared. The blonde turned to face the man and remarked, "I feel like you shouldn't be telling me this." Jiraiya gave a shrug. "Yes and no, I don't think Tsunade has too much of a problem with me telling you that things could get hairy. But at the same time, you probably shouldn't go spreading this kind of thing around. As it stands, this is all just possibilities. For all we know, Suna could suddenly back out or Orochimaru could go to ground. Things are far from fluid at this point. This is just something of an early warning." Naruto remarked, "I don't think the sand is going to pull away. They've already been embarrassed enough by the failed invasion. They have to keep on pushing. And we both know there isn't a chance in hell that Paleface is going to let an opportunity to cause us trouble pass him by." The man gave a nod. "Exactly, which comes to the real reason I'm here." To stop the man from going any further, Naruto raised his right hand. "Let me guess, you'll need to go and check things out. Which will leave me on my own for a while." "Right in one. I've already spoken to Tsunade about gathering more information and searching for resources. I'll be leaving in the next day or so. Time is of the essence." The wise man smiled lightly. "But that doesn't mean you'll be completely left high and dry." In response, the blonde lifted his left eyebrow. "The old man's teammates did good work while we were away. They informed Tsunade of the situation and laid out a couple of well-thought-out plans. Tsunade is going to be going over them and finding out how viable they are as she gets used to the job. But one thing that was decided to go right into effect was a change in some of the younger forces." Inquiringly, Naruto titled his head. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you'll be placed onto a new team as opposed to being left to your own devices. Tsunade has issued an okay for a plan to change Chunin squads up. Starting next week, you'll be placed into a new group that you'll work with to get some experience. It'll give you a chance to meet some new faces while getting a better idea of what the village has to offer." The blonde gave a nod. Fair enough. That appealed to him easily enough. He didn't really understand the range of skills that shinobi could possess before taking the Chunin exams. All he could think about were cool taijutsu moves and enormous fireballs. However, he now realized that the shinobi arts were much more inventive than he had first believed. He realized how naive and short-sighted he had been after witnessing the Aburame clan's tactics and engaging in one-on-one combat with a puppeteer shinobi. Constant improvement was a sure sign of an elite shinobi. And trying new things was a surefire way to get better. That was another lesson the boy had learned from the Sandaime. Even now, Naruto knew that he would discover new opportunities for personal development by sparring with new partners and going on missions with unfamiliar faces. The blonde experienced a surge of excitement for the first time since the tournament day. It was obvious that Tsunade and Jiraiya had high hopes for him. Consequently, he had the chance to develop on his own merits. Naruto asked, "What about the Akatsuki? I can assume safely that I'll have missions outside of the village. What happens if I run into their ilk?" Before responding, the Sannin paused. "I don't really know what to say, kid. We don't have any real information on them apart from what you already know. We don't know how they operate or what ties they have. For all we know, they could have agents in this village. At any rate, we can't afford to have you hiding somewhere in fear of them. The only real way to keep you safe is to keep you moving and growing as a shinobi. And this is the best way to do that," the man said while crossing his arms over his torso. "Besides, that isn't your style." "You're correct about that." The boy asked, "Do you have anything else to teach me before you go? Something that can help me out while you're away?" The man nodded and said, "As a matter of fact, I do." The man leaned forward to get out of his chair and said, "I won't have time to teach you Fuinjutsu as I promised, but I'll leave you some of my old notes behind so you'll at least be able to get started. And some ninjutsu as well to keep you preoccupied. Oh, and Tsunade wanted me to pass on a scroll on chakra control exercises. Stuff that medical shinobi have to finish. Said it would do a good deal of help in controlling your stupid large reserves." Naruto got up from his chair and said, "I can see the logic in that, thanks." Jiraiya walked to the door and declared, "It's the least I can do. I'm sorry I don't have more time to talk, but I have things I need to take care of before I leave. And Tsunade wanted me to do her personal favor and check something out. Just keep on training hard and you'll be fine. You're doing a far better job than you think you are. The Sandaime would have been proud to see how far you've come already." At the last part, Naruto nodded without responding. Before the boy entered the apartment and went out into the hallway, Jiraiya gave him a quick smile. As his thoughts started racing, the blonde went to the door and locked it once more. He was thinking about what the man had told him. The pace was quick. Too quickly. Furthermore, there was nothing he could do to slow them down. In the big picture, he was too much of a liability as it was. Still far too feeble to be considered a true asset. However, he would work to make that change as soon as possible. "I'll be a different shinobi the next time we cross paths with an old pervert." He could fulfill that promise. The Junin opened his eyes. Tsunade observed as the man's eyes shifted to the hospital room's drab white ceiling. The man's face split into a frown, and then a faint sigh escaped into the atmosphere. His mind was cloudy and his body felt heavy. However, he was still able to recognize a hospital. Kakashi moaned in a scratchy voice, "Not this place again." From her position next to the man's bed, the slug Sannin reflected, "It seems as if you've become used to hospitals as of late." The copy. Nin's head slowly swiveled to the right after blinking in surprise. Their eyes locked, and Tsunade returned the man's gaze. Observing his bewilderment gave way to familiarity. The gears in his head started turning, and she could almost see the frown beneath his face mask. The Junin opened his mouth to say, "Wait," then a slight cough escaped. With a frustrated sigh, the woman strode into the tiny bathroom that was connected to the hospital room. She came back a moment later holding a tiny paper cup full of water. Kakashi muttered his gratitude as he fumbled for the drink. Before she reached out and took the cup away from him, the newly inducted Hokage observed the renowned Junin taking a deep drink. Before attempting to speak again, Kakashi allowed the liquid to run down his sore throat. He began by saying, "I know you, but I don't seem to remember your name." She gave a headshake. That was expected. She had only ever really interacted with the prodigy ninja once, through his association with Kushina. As a boy, she had never spoken to the man directly, and he had spent the majority of his life outside the village. In his place, she said, "It's Tsunade. Senju Tsunade." The man nodded, his mismatched eyes widening slightly. As he started to connect the face and name, the Junin said out loud, "Yes. We met out on a mission once." The woman concluded for him, "Your group was following Kushina around, in place of your normal sensei. I was in a restaurant you came across on your way back to Konoha." The Junin scowled and tried to concentrate. "Yes ma'am. I remember, but I don't remember much about how I got here." Tsunade gave him a name that encapsulated it, Uchiha Itachi. The man appeared to suddenly regain consciousness. He tensed, then, with great effort, he leapt to his feet. The lack of movement and adequate blood flow caused his head to feel light and his vision to go awry, but the Junin was still able to remain sitting up as he started to recollect his memories. After a few moments, the man finally said, "Naruto, did he get caught?" After giving him a quick glance, the woman shook her head. She looked from his bed to another and said, "No, Jiraiya was with him. Although he's not the only one who was in danger." Her gaze was followed by a bewildered Kakashi until it settled on the other bed in his room. when he saw another of his students lying unconscious, his breath caught in his throat. He fought the urge to swing his legs out of the bed, his fists balled up at his sides. The man practically demanded, "What happened?" Tsunade told him calmly, "The same thing that happened to you." Jiraiya said the boy went running in over his head. "Ended up in the same mess you did." The Junin asked in a rough voice, "How did he find out? Did Itachi go into the Uchiha clan compound?" Her eyes narrowed as she took in the young Uchiha heir. "I suppose he overheard someone talking about it. Went running off without any other warning. That will have to change. We can't have young ninja just up and leaving like that." The man concurred, saying, "He's always been quite a hothead. Is he going to be okay?" The medic replied, "He should be fine. I just haven't moved on to fix the problem yet. He got hit with the same technique you did. He also sustained a broken wrist, but that was already set and healing by the time I arrived here. I'll take care of him before I leave." The Junin muttered in audible relief, "That's good to hear. That genjutsu is some powerful stuff. I've never heard of anything like it. It's called the Tsukuyomi. The man was told by the slug Sanin. It's a rare and powerful Uchiha clan technique. A forbidden genjutsu only obtained by way of the strongest caliber of Sharingan capable." Once more, the Junin scowled. "I don't think I know anything about that." With a slight tisk, the woman stated, "It's forbidden for a reason. The Uchiha clan did extensive work to make sure that it stayed buried. I only know about it from Sarutobi Sensei and my great-uncle. These techniques are what made Uchiha Madara such a terrifying figure and allowed for him to fight my grandfather on equal footing." Now certain that his genin would be alright, the Junin leaned back in the bed and asked, "Then how did Itachi find out about them? If they were forbidden?" As she watched the man settle back into his chair, Tsunade remarked, "I have no idea. But it makes sense when you put the pieces of the puzzle together. He probably used it to help him kill off the other members of his clan. On a power high after he reached a new level of Sharingan that hadn't been seen in decades." As he processed all of this, the Junin nodded slowly. As he considered the facts, his thoughts started to calm down. His eyes returned to his unconscious pupil. His relief had been tinged with a deep sense of shame. Kakashi declared aloud, "I was unable to do a thing. Itachi isn't the same shinobi he was when under my command. He's grown to an incredible degree." Observing his anxious look, the woman added, "While you've stayed still. Or at least so they say. I don't have a frame of reference to judge your skill on." The Junin said, his disappointment in himself clearly audible, "It's true though." He stopped when he realized something. "I haven't pushed myself for quite a while now. These last few weeks have. Just how long was I out again?" The Sanin answered, "Long enough. 2 weeks plus apparently." The man appeared to relax once more after saying, "Ah, that's not as bad as I thought it'd be. Thank you for coming all this way to heal us." The woman said, "Actually I was just coming by to see the hospital. I'd heard from the head doctor that you were in here and in trouble and decided to see if I could do something about it. It's actually just coincidence for the most part." The man said, "I see, but I still want to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You don't see the big picture." The man's scowl deepened. "Big picture?" The woman told him, "The village needs all the help it can get. It wouldn't do me any good to have one of the strongest Junin around lying comatose in a bed when we could be using your skill to help with the upcoming trouble. We don't have the luxury of having combatants of your caliber growing on trees like in my days." The man asked, "What trouble?" as his concern reappeared. "What's happened?" As she passed his bed and approached the younger shinobi in the room, the Sanin responded, "That's a conversation to be held in private. You'll have to come by my office at some other time in order to talk things over. We can't have people overhearing things just yet." The Junin's forehead wrinkled. "Office?" He didn't realize the woman was staying here at the hospital? Ignoring the man's astonished gaze, the woman started working on the genin and answered, "No, at the tower. I'm the Hokage now after all." At the young Kunyachi sitting across from him, Amino Iruka scowled. The career Chunin emphasized, "You mean you haven't seen him in weeks?" Sakura smiled sheepishly at him and embarrassedly reached up with her right hand to rub the back of her head. As politely as she could, she replied, "I'm sorry, Iruka. Sensei. I don't know what else to tell you." Her words caused Iruka's scowl to deepen even more. In an attempt to obtain information, he had come looking for the last member of Team 7. He was eager to hear from his favorite former pupil, with whom he had not spoken in a while. He had last spoken to Naruto at the conclusion of the second Chunin exam section. And it had already been months since then. The rumors that had been circulating among his fellow shinobi that the boy had been present during the attack on the village were the only thing that had eased his concern for the boy's safety. Naturally, he had also heard that the genin had been engaged in combat during the invasion, which had made him even more concerned despite reports of the boy's alleged prowess. This knot in his stomach had only been tightened by the fact that no one had apparently seen the boy since that day. The man had been compelled to seek information because he believed the boy was seriously hurt or worse, which had brought him to what appeared to be a dead end, a frazzled Haruno Sakura that he had discovered in the village hospital's cafeteria. Iruka persisted in asking, "Have you heard anything? Anything at all about him?" "No, sir," was the girl's honest response. As her face became troubled, she trailed off, "I know Kakashi Sensei was going to inquire about him once he left the hospital, but I don't know what happened. Sensei and Sasuke-kun both are upstairs in the same room, and the doctors don't know if they'll ever wake up. And no one will give me any kind of an update or if they know what's happened to Naruto." Iruka's own distress seemed to be somewhat alleviated by the girl's worried expression and broken tone. Even without him asking her 20 questions, it was obvious that the girl was struggling. The man started to calm himself, taking a mental step back at the sight of the female genin's trembling form. The girl's teammate was Naruto. This implied that her motivation for seeking the boy was equal to his. And the poor girl must have been tortured by the thought that the only opportunity she could find for a lead on him had resulted in the death of 2 other members of her team. "I think she's just as anxious as I am." Amino Iruka became aware. She should be aware of what has transpired with her teammates. He felt like a dick right now. Iruka tried to comfort Sakura, saying softly, "I'm sorry, Sakura. I didn't mean to push you. I'm just worried about him." Slowly, the girl nodded, her gaze lingering on the food on the table in front of her. "I know, Iruka. Sensei, I am too." The man went on, "I shouldn't have pressed you though, it was thoughtless of me." "It's okay, sir. I would have done the same in your posit." "There you are, Iruka. Sensei." The new voice registered in the minds of the two-leaf ninja, and they blinked. A figure wearing black shorts and a white shirt, with a Hite.8 wrapped around his right bicep, strolled up to stand by Iruka, startling him. Before the young speaker's eyes met the shock of blonde hair and bright blue eyes, the man's brown eyes trailed over him. The man's lower jaw dropped in a shock of recognition. The girl on the other side of him glanced over with just as much surprise as the man did and half asked, "Naruto?" The blonde in question gave her a quick glance before a small frown took its place. He calmly said, "Sakura." Then his eyes returned to the man he had first spoken to. "I've finally found you." The man appeared to get back into gear after that. Before his annoyance started to grow, Iruka raised his eyes to meet the blonde's. The man's shoulders squared up and his body tensed as a wave of indignation compelled him to glare back in annoyance. Now that he has seen the boy safely, his anxiety is fading into faint traces of rage. "Found me? You finally found me?" he asked. "You idiot, I've spent the last few weeks looking everywhere for you." Naruto didn't appear to be bothered by the man's growing annoyance. As his left hand extended to pull one of the little wooden chairs away from the round plastic table, he instead gave the man a languid half smile. Without being asked, he sat down and then rested the limb on the tabletop by the elbow while leaning his cheek into his right hand. The blonde looked back at the man's red face and drawled, "Really? That's surprising to hear. It makes sense though, I guess. Nice to know that you've been looking out for me." Iruka fought the impulse to strike the boy in the face and responded with a strangled sound. Sakura was less restrained. The girl yelled, "You idiot," and shocked the nearby customers by slapping her open palm on the table. "Don't be so casual about these things." The boy's blue eyes flashed with an emotion the girl couldn't identify, and then his face hardened. He looked at the female member of Genin Squad number 7 across the tabletop, his lips pulling back into a sneer. The 2 other Leaf Ninja were taken aback by the abrupt shift in attitude. The blonde replied, "I can be as casual about it as I want." There was obviously some annoyance in her voice, but not much heat. "And lower your damn voice. This is a hospital." The abrupt reprimand caused the girl's vivid green eyes to blink. The fact that Naruto of all people had told someone to tone it down started to sink in the back of her mind, and she was at a loss for words, so she just stared back at the boy. What had become of the world? Iruka started, trying to get past the boy's abrupt change in attitude, in an effort to diffuse the unexpected tension between his 2 former students. The dark-haired academy teacher tried to calmly explain, "We've just been really worried about you, Naruto. In fact, we were just talking about you." Naruto's eyes swiftly returned to the man, as if the words had accomplished their goal. As the boy thought about what the man had said, the academy teacher saw how his eyes grew brighter. To get a better view of his former academy sensei, the blonde moved in his chair. In response, the boy said, "I guess I can see that. Sorry about making you worry then. It wasn't my intention. I would have come seen you sooner if I'd been able to." Hesitantly, Iruka observed the boy's brilliant blonde hair cascading around the frame of his head and said, "That's alright, I suppose." Given that the boy had adopted goggles while attending the academy and had only replaced his headband with them after he became a ninja, it was a different appearance that the man wasn't used to. It was just frustrating to not know anything after searching for answers everywhere. The blonde gave his shoulders a small shrug. "Don't really know what to tell you. It wasn't like I had the time to stop and send you a letter or something. These last few months have been really busy for me. It's been one crisis after another." The man had not anticipated that response, but it was sufficient, particularly since what mattered most was that the boy sitting beside him was okay. And possibly even superior to that. Observing the shifts in the boy's shape and demeanor, Iruka took another look at the blonde. He felt that Naruto had matured significantly since their last encounter. With a nod and a faint smile, the Chunin remarked, "You look healthy. Better than that, in fact. I can see you've picked up something of a muscle tone. It won't be long before you're a big strong ninja with all the ladies hanging on your arm." Iruka chuckled. The man's light-hearted tone made Naruto smile subtly. "Sooner than you think. I'll pass you up in no time if you aren't too careful." When Iruka smiled cheekily, she said, "Maybe. But I still have some time to hold my higher rank over your head. At least until the next Chunin exam, that is." The boy's mouth changed into a grin that was almost savage. Naruto's eyes flashed with victory, and then he sat up a little more. As the boy's eyes met the older man's, Iruka felt the sarcastic superiority in his voice fade away and he was forced to pay attention to what the blonde had to say. There was a hint of smugness in the blonde's own tone as she asked, "Why would I have to wait? I'm already a Chunin after all. I don't need to participate again." Naruto thought the man's expression was priceless. Iruka's eyes had widened with awe and shock, and his lower jaw had dropped in surprise. What? Sakura shouted as Shiri entered the conversation. Her chair fell to the floor behind her, and she shot to her feet with a clatter of wood, her face looking as though she had swallowed something especially sour. What's that supposed to mean? The pride Naruto had just experienced was immediately replaced by annoyance. A frown appeared on his face as his gaze swept back over the girl. With some irritation, Naruto replied, "It's just like I said. I was promoted after the exam. And you've gotten loud again. You don't want to get kicked out of the hospital for disturbing people, do you?" the brunette said quietly. The girl regained consciousness after hearing those words. Her big eyes darted to the other patrons who were enjoying their daily lunch in the cafeteria. They turned to her standing form and heard mumbles of frustration and annoyance coming from all directions. The girl ducked her head in embarrassment, her face practically glowing with a bright blush. Before she fell back with a sigh, she hurried back to pick up her chair and practically curled up in it to conceal herself. Iruka, who had done a far better job of controlling his own astonishment, had just started blinking. Iruka could tell Naruto hadn't been lying at all by the tone of the boy's voice and the confident grin he had given the man. Iruka was also accustomed to Naruto's deceit. "How?" was all he could think to say in this circumstance. Fortunately, it perfectly captured the rest of his emotions. Naruto's brow was furrowed as he turned back to face the man. "What do you mean how?" he asked in return. "I showed I was ready for the position and they gave me the rank. That's all that I needed." Sakura spoke up once more, much more subtly, as she made a conscious effort to maintain a low voice. "But I thought no one was promoted." She had lowered her voice to a mumble. "I asked everyone else already." Naruto corrected her, saying, "Everyone else didn't make it to the finals, and if you don't recall, I was the only one who even got to fight. The rest all bailed out before their matches could start and the attack began during the final match of the first round," the blonde recalled. Before she could say anything in response, the girl had to snap her mouth shut. At that moment, she understood that Naruto was correct. All the other members of the Leaf Village who had advanced to the finals had either given up or were unable to continue fighting. And the unexpected attack had disrupted Sasuke's match, as the boy had stated. Sakura remarked, "Even so, I believe they wouldn't count those results, because of the attack." Iruka moved around in his seat. "I don't remember anyone saying that," he continued. "I think you just assumed that was the case, Sakura." Naruto assisted in explaining, "And even if they did, I got recommendations. I fought in the village for the first half of the battle. And I got credit for stopping the Ichibi when the rest of you all fled. That was more than enough to show that I was ready for the uptick in rank." All he seemed to need was the explanation. Sakura frowned thoughtfully as she reclined in her chair. Iruka held up his left hand palm up and said, "Wait a minute. What do you mean credit for stopping the Ichibi? You mean to say you fought that thing?" Naruto replied with a shrug. With narrowed eyes, Iruka demanded, "What in the hell were you thinking? Why would you go anywhere near that monster?" The blonde scowled. It's not like I had a damn choice. I was already fighting him before he transformed. And I was technically ordered to help stop it from getting into the village. I wasn't really given a chance to run away. That was obviously the truth. Even if he had been given the option, he wouldn't have rushed in to fight something like that. Iruka didn't think that did much to strengthen his case. He looked shocked at the thought. Who the hell would order a genin to fight something like that? Whoever had called was a complete moron. Naruto gave him a death stare. Iruka suddenly relaxed and nodded, figuring, right. His response became evident abruptly. Your Junin. Sensei is noted for making head-scratching decisions. Sakura snapped her mouth shut after opening it to defend the honor of her squad leader. Technically, Kakashi did send them after the monster genin, and the man was correct. Furthermore, she was unable to assert that the man consistently made wise decisions when combined with the Wave Country mission. Iruka tried to divert the conversation by asking, "Where is your vest?" "It's your symbol as a chunin. A measure of pride." With mild amusement, Naruto retorted, "And it's dirty. And scratched up too. I'm supposed to get a second and third as backups. I didn't have time to grab them before I left the village. And I just got back a few days ago. I've been catching up on sleep for the most part." He added the final sentence out of habit. The academy teacher's expression twisted in bewilderment. "Just getting back? Where did you go?" He thought that because of the village attack and the absence of a suitable Hokage, all ongoing missions had been halted for the previous few weeks. "On a trip with the old pervert." Naruto calmly replied, "We went looking for the drunk hag." "Who?" The final sentence was delivered in a mocking manner. "Jiraiya and Tsunade." Naruto told the man, "I went with him to look for her. We brought her back to take the Hokage's chair." Thus the fireworks and general fanfare over the past few days in order to welcome our honored leader. Sakura and Iruka simply blinked back. The girl was the first to get better. "The Hokage? You went to find Tsunade of the Sannin with the help of Jiraiya of the Sannin?" Naruto scowled. "That's what I just said, damn it." Iruka began slowly, "No, you just called two of the greatest ninja the village has ever produced by the titles of Old Pervert and Drunk Hag." "Yeah." Naruto nodded gravely in agreement. "That's exactly what I meant. It's synonymous with who they are as people." Iruka's eyes darted around and he hissed, "It's disrespectful." The man's concern was almost tangible. "You can't talk about them like that. The Sandaime isn't around anymore, Naruto. The new Hokage might not be willing to let things slide like he did." In response, Naruto rolled his eyes, as if the old lady gives a damn. She's probably too busy getting plastered right about now. Or I could be standing right behind you. The three of them tensed up at the new arrival. Naruto relaxed after taking a quick look over his shoulder. The woman had easily caught him off guard because he hadn't been actively looking for anyone. That minor issue would need to be resolved, and he would need to pay close attention at all times. "Oh," he said, sounding bored. "It's you." The slug princess sneered as she moved to his right side and into his line of sight, saying, "No, it's the tooth fairy." Disregarding the two wide-eyed people seated at the table, "I've come to collect your baby teeth. If only. Then I may have an actual chance at getting back all that money owed to me." The woman scowled. "I told you, it's the price for me coming along with you." The blonde boy shot back, "No, it's the price for your sick addiction. And I'm the one who had to pay for it." The woman shrugged and said, "Details." Then she looked at the two other people seated at the table. "Who are these two?" The Chunin leaned back in his chair and smirked at the woman, while the other two stared and objected to the interaction between the two blondes. "Iruka and Sakura meet the old biddy. Old biddy say hi." Tsunade cocked her hips to the left and crossed her arms over her oversized bust, demanding, "You should show me some more respect, you little bastard. I can make life for you very difficult with all the power I have at my disposal." Naruto's lazy drawl in response to the threat read, "Haven't been in the office for a week and you already abusing your position. Oh, how the Sandaime weeps from his grave." Tsunade gave a snort. "That bastard had me smuggling tobacco to him the entire first month of his tenure. Claimed he kept going through his stashes trying to keep the village organized during the war. I personally thought he just had a problem." Her face lit up when she recalled the incident. Naruto asked, "And that's different from your drinking habits, how?" To be honest, he was interested. She made the sound argument that he wasn't a master medical nin who could cure all his ailments with a single technique. The response caused Naruto's eyebrows to lift. "Oh, I can see how that is different." After eyeing the boy, the woman briefly fell silent before turning to face the other two seated at the table. As the woman's eyes settled on Sakura and Iruka, who were growing paler with each word the boy returned, they stiffened. Then Tsunade smiled slightly and favored each of them. She said to them politely, "It's a pleasure to meet you. I imagine you've been through quite a lot having to put up with this little bastard. Iruka was startled to say, Yes ma'am, in greeting. I found out the hard way over his time at the academy. He can be quite a handful. Before focusing entirely on Sakura, she muttered under her breath, don't I know it, and you girl? How do you know him? Oh, Sakura exclaimed, startled to be spoken to directly. I'm his teammate, part of Team 7. Naruto interrupted with his usual irritated drawl, teammate, I'm a chunin now. Tsunade ignored her fellow blonde, determined to focus on Kakashi's kids. That makes sense. After meeting such a significant person, Sakura's shyness returned, and she was only able to nod in response. Tsunade returned her focus to Naruto and started again, speaking of Kakashi. The Uchiha heir was mentioned after the fact. I've just come from speaking to the man. I fixed the little mental problem he was having. Along with the other boy as well. What? Sakura exclaimed as she rose to her feet, her normal demeanor returning to its proper position. Sasuke-kun and Kakashi. Sensei are okay? Tsunade's eyes returned to the girl, and her honey-colored eyes glowed with amusement. As the young girl fled the cafeteria, the Hokage trailed off, saying, yes. They were both awake when I left. I had a nurse checking in on them. And you didn't hear a word I said past a confirmation. I can tell she's a loud one. Naruto joked, violent too. Just like you. The woman turned back to face him and pondered, I'm sure. You're not going to run off too? A hard tint came over Naruto's eyes. He openly acknowledged, much to the surprise of Iruka and Tsunade, I don't really having anything to say to them. My showing up would only cause problems. The woman's right eyebrow went up. Trouble with your team? With a serious expression, Naruto remarked, and then some. It's easier to say that we weren't really much of a team to start off with in the first place. I was more like the ad. On who was there for comic relief. I'm not looking forward to a reunion anytime soon. Especially with those other two. A whisper came from Tsunade. I know how that is. Anyway, I've got important things to do. Like getting drunk? The woman sighed and said, I wish. Jiraiya has talked to you already? With focused eyes, the blonde boy nodded. Yes. Her tone was warning. Good, I trust you can keep everything he said quiet. Naruto reassured her, my lips are sealed. I won't be saying anything. Good. Just keep working on what he's left for you. You'll get a scroll within the next few days with further instructions. The boy used his right hand to give her a fictitious salute. After rolling her eyes, she stalked off with the intention of frightening another unfortunate person. After watching her leave, Naruto returned his focus to the reason he had come to the hospital in the first place. You okay? Asked the blonde, feigning concern. You still look a little shell-shocked. Iruka nodded slightly and said, a little. That wasn't what I expected. Naruto said, it's your fault for expecting anything. Always prepare for the unexpected. It was one of the shinobi rules you tried to bully into our heads. The man snorted slightly and said, for the good that did. And what's this about problems with Team 7? With a grimace, Naruto stated, let's not get into that. He was clearly trying to avoid talking about his former teammates. Lunch instead. And not this hospital crap. I'm buying for once. I got paid for getting her back to the village and have more than enough to spend on it. The man paused, then gave a small smile. Iruka got up from his chair and conceded, sounds good. Have you been to Ichiraku's since you've been back? The blonde stood up and shook his head. No, I was going to say hi to them next. Iruka smiled abruptly. You're in for a treat then. The old stand got destroyed during the attack on the village, but they both made it out alright. And the insurance combined with money they won from your victory during the exam. Well, it'll be better to just show you. As he followed the man out of the building, Naruto arched his brows. How might Ichiraku's be improved? That is, aside from more ramen.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.